Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 215. My name is NBZ, and if I could have Kirby swallow one thing, what would it be? Probably a television. I think television Kirby walking around and, if you wanted to move your TV to another room, it'd be easy. Just get Kirby to swallow it. He walks upstairs for you. Don't have to have manual labor. He can hover above your bed to watch it when you're in bed. It's a great idea in my opinion. Bally, if you could get Kirby to swallow anything, what would he swallow?
I'd get him to swallow my flat. Because it's been very windy recently, and we just need that extra insulation, and maybe just before bedtime, Kirby could just swallow the flat, and then we know that the cold wind overnight is not going to get through the windows, and it'll just make me feel better. He's
a solid windbreak, Totally. His skin, I imagine, is it has that kind of rubbery texture to it, to where that there's nothing getting through that.
Does it have a breaking point?
I don't think so, given what we have seen, the evidence on show on display that we're going to get into.
What is the largest item that Kirby will swallow in Kirby and the Forgotten Land?
I feel like there's an Asura's Wrath, potential here for Kirby to become planet-sized and swallow the Earth. If the end of this game is Kirby swallowing a planet, I will not be surprised. I will also be very impressed.
I think he's going to swallow the final boss. That's my prediction for the largest thing in the game he will swallow.
Yeah. I think that's definitely possible. Man, there's been some great memes on Twitter about Kirby swallowing stuff. My favorite from Jan of Giant Bomb, who just made the VLC logo of Kirby with the cone, is just fucking perfect. It's so
my
good.
Favorite was if a car wore a Kirby, would it wear it like this or like this? And it's what's that based on? I think it's based on a turtle wearing trousers or something, or a dog wearing trousers. But
yeah,
it's this idea that you pull it up one way versus the other. It's hilarious.
Anyway, hello, this is a podcast where we will talk about Kirby and his various proclivities for voring objects, things, people, who knows. Kirby he's flexible. As we say, he's one of Nintendo's most viable characters for doing new and weird ideas, because he is inherently a very flexible guy, and we'll get into it. But hi, I'm MBZ. I'm here to talk about Nintendo and video games. I'm joined by Bally, who is also here to do the same. How are you doing, Bally?
I'm doing very well. I'm very, very pumped from that direct, and that February boost we all needed.
Yeah, it gives us a nice shot in the arm, a lot of excitement, a lot of stuff going on, and we'll be talking about it amongst plenty of other things. So, Bally, do you want to tell people what our show today is going to be all about?
We're going to do a 2-segment show this time because there's just so much to talk about. And this time we're going to do our Nintendo Direct discussion in the first segment. And then for the second segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing.
Yeah, we know why you all clicked this podcast. It was to hear our hot takes first, so we thought we might as well get them out of the way. Talk about the Nintendo Direct and then get to the video games, what we've been playing. So that is exactly what we're going to do. All right, give me a bird's eye perspective, Bally, on this. How do you feel about this Direct generally? I think I've seen a lot of folks with some varying opinions. I think generally quite positive overall from most people, but what's your kind of takeaway from this February Direct?
I think occasionally these start of the year directs, and often they're in February, sometimes March, sometimes January, they've been pretty mixed in the past, but when I look back, I think that when they do well in those early months, they really hit it out of the park. And I would actually probably put this one in that camp, in the fact that we got updates on tons of stuff we already know about. Mm-hmm. We got a bunch of new game announcements that are for this year.
Yes.
And we got a ton of exciting ports in between and some other fun announcements that we can get to. And I think that they did a good job of, there's something for everyone here. I don't think, certainly there's a lot in there for your turn-based strategy fans, maybe, apart from Fire Emblem, ironically.
Yeah.
So I think there is something for everyone here, and I think it's a very, very, very impressive direct. One thing I might say is that I think these directs are maybe becoming slightly more indie light, as they tend to do more directs focusing on indies these days, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, and if they do spot an indie, it would be a higher profile one, when Haunted Chocolatier is coming out from Eric Baroni, I'm sure that would get a spotlight, or, Hollow Knight Silk Song, God forbid, if it ever appears in any form, I'm sure would get the main direct spotlight. But yeah, you're right, this is generally focusing on big Nintendo stuff and a lot of like third-party partners, mainly Japanese ones for the most part. And, I talked about this last time we talked over a direct where a lot of people were disappointed with it because it's like, oh, so many JRPGs and stuff like that. And I do think Nintendo are the console for that now. If you're talking about niche old games that they're bringing back, there's really Xbox obviously supports backwards compatibility, but Nintendo do it in a way that really goes back into the heritage of classic Japanese games in a way that neither Sony or Microsoft are doing, and it's really the one place that you can get cool stuff like that, which is my bullshit. I'm very much into, I bought an entire mini handheld just so I can play a bunch of old JRPGs, right? That's exactly what I'm here for. So seeing them give such deep and wide and niche support to those types of collections or older games, I really appreciate and think is just a really cool thing.
It's also the console that kind of supports the modern incarnations of games like that, with games like Triangle Strategy, that are very much harking to that mold, and that's a Switch exclusive for the time being,
Exactly. So yeah, for me, this was a stellar direct. Absolutely loads of stuff that I was into. And I think overall, it had variety, but also a lot of kind of interesting stuff that people didn't expect. Lots of weird stuff that just kind of came out of nowhere and was like, wait, what? I've never heard of this thing, or this thing that people loved but never thought would come back is, it's very, very cool to see. So yeah, I guess let's just get into it and pick stuff out. Bally, where do you want to start here? What's the thing that stands out to you the most from this direct?
Mario Kart 8 Deluxe.
All right.
Okay, where do we begin?
Oh boy. All right. So if you've listened to this podcast for the last 8-9 years now, you'll be aware that Bally and myself, we're very much in the camp of, look, if we've bought a video game, we're not going to buy it again. I'm very much against this idea of rebuying stuff we've already bought, because you already own it, right? I'm not paying Nintendo twice for the same thing. And nothing makes this more emblematic.
It says halfway through Skyward Sword, but yes.
Okay, well that's that's an actual full remake a decade later. Okay. So
this arguably is a decade later as well.
At this point, yes, it almost is a decade later, which is scary to think about. But the point at which Mario Kart 8 came out was 2017, and we had bought it in 2014. That's 3 years removed. That's not a long time, which made sense back then of
it already felt weird then.
It felt weird because we were still using our Wii U's back then. Switch had just come out, and it's I'm not buying Mario Kart. In fact, you decided to get your Wii U out again, and you and Caroline just continue to play Mario Kart 8.
Yeah, we've played plenty of Mario Kart on our Wii U. We love it.
Especially given that they supported it with DLC that we had paid for and we had bought stuff for. It was one of those things where Mario Kart 8 had come out, and I'm like, great, Nintendo, I'll wait for your next Mario Kart. I'm sure you're making a new one. I'm sure it's gonna happen, right? Because they're just porting this one. Turns out, as I don't think we talked about the latest financials yet, but obviously Nintendo Switch passed 100 million units, and Mario Kart 8 sold 43 fucking million units, which means if you add the Wii U sales, it's over 50 million, making it one of the best-selling games of all time.
You could double the sales of Wii U and it still wouldn't be there.
Yeah, it's sickening. It is absolutely just disgusting how well Mario Kart 8 has sold. And there's a few factors, I think, playing into this booster course, which that's basically what they're doing, right? They are doing a
6 packs
of DLC 5 years later, after this re-release, let's say, of a formerly 2014 Wii U game is now getting additional support from Nintendo. Let's remind ourselves, the same company that added Bluetooth support to the Switch 4 years into its life cycle, the same company that added multiplayer to a Mario Party game 3 years after it came out. It is within keeping with what they are doing, but also within the context of Smash Brothers DLC has now ended. So what is Nintendo's next thing to get people hyped every single time there's a direct to see what's coming? And of course, with Mario Kart, sure, characters are a fun thing, but characters are not really the reason you play Mario Kart. Courses are what people are there for. And so it is very logical and very, tactical for them to have said, we're doing this, also it's going to be by the end of 2023, which now gives them 2 more years of something with a big game that people are still playing to continue to drip feed information and hype and excitement with. And from that standpoint, it's very smart. I don't think that Mario Kart 8, elicits the same fanboyism or excitement that Smash Brothers does. It's a far more casual franchise. It's a far more casual audience. But I still think it speaks to a larger audience, and I think this DLC will obviously sell way better than the Smash Brothers one did. Because there's more people, but also because they're including it with the expansion pass.
Which is so clever.
It's really smart.
That's such a stroke of genius. And, people, there have been like the two camps, like, we need Mario Kart 9, we need Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC, and we've always been in the camp of let's have a new game, let's go fresh. But there have been a lot of voices suggesting like, yeah, what we need is Mario Kart 8 DLC. And it's just, this game launched with the Switch Deluxe, like 2017. We're now in 2022. Like, for DLC to come to a game like 5 years later in that way is incredibly strange. But you're right, like Smash Brothers is now ended. Like, people will obviously be playing that, but there's no more drip feeding of characters. And this is the new drip feed. And it's like it was always an option on the back burner. They've obviously been putting a certain amount of resources, at least, into Mario Kart Tour, which apparently is an official Mario Kart because tracks from that game are now coming into this game. So it implies that the next Mario Kart will actually be Mario Kart 10 and not Mario Kart 9, which is also shocking.
Which also, like, if you want to go by, there's the arcade games and stuff, and adding those into the mix means that 7 and 8 are in fact wrong numbers anyway. But we'll ignore that for now.
But it's like DLC tracks have always been on their minds and on the back burner, and they've been waiting for the perfect moment. And I think, as you say, the combination of Smash Brothers drying up with the drip feed, combined with the expansion pack launching, combined with these new sales figures that say Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is at 43 million, it, like, the stars have aligned. Like, it just makes sense right now that between now and I believe until the end of 2023, and it's 6 packs, I believe, of 4 tracks each or something, like 1 Grand Prix each. So, like, that's a lot
48.
of tracks.
48
that's
courses.
A lot of stuff.
It's like doubling the amount of courses in the game. It's insane. Oh my god.
Wait, 6 times 4? Yeah.
48.
Wait, no, that's 20.
Yeah.
6 times 4.
They said
24.
They said it's 48 courses total.
In that case, you get 2 Grand Prix per pack. Yeah, that does make sense. You're right. Yeah, 48. It's just loads. So the other thing I think this is good for is, yes, it kills off Mario Kart 10 for the time being, but it's what they're doing is playing into what they know, what they're good at, what they can do fairly easily, porting these courses. Sure, they'll have a bit of a polish for the Switch version.
There's so many cool courses from older games, like the Toy Room course from the GBA game, that they just did a complete. Obviously, like, you can't just port a fucking GBA course over. You got to remake an entire thing. So a lot of those. We
got like Choco Mountain from the N64. I used to love that track. And
exactly.
There's cool stuff there, but what I think it also says is that, when Mario Kart 10 does eventually come, either at the end of the Switch's life cycle, or it'll probably be both a Switch game and a Switch 2 game, or who knows what it'll be. But I think this hints to me that will be a bit of a fundamental change to the Mario Kart series. And maybe those rumors about the next Mario Kart being, what was it? There'll be something unique and fundamentally different or something. It was the quote. I can't remember. But
a twist, a certain kind of change.
A twist. I think that argument still stands. It's just about 3 years off or 4 years off is the problem. And hey, I have been wanting to get back on the Mario Kart train, and I was basically following Nintendo's lead, and unfortunately, this is where I'm going to do it. And you've been checking the eShop, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is on sale for £33 here in the UK, and I think we're both going to do it because we already have the expansion pack, and I'm excited. I am excited about that. I think jumping on with the Discord community, jumping on with you, MBZ, just doing a bit of casual Mario Kart, which is also a very good podcasting game. I'm looking forward to that. And I wanted, when's it coming out this year?
March, I believe, sometime in the middle of March.
That is soon. Soon.
The first one anyway is dropping then, and they'll do them periodically. I imagine one every 3 months or so. Probably makes sense.
I hope those tracks do create a good buzz on social media and stuff, and we can jump back in and enjoy the zeitgeist of Mario Kart, because it has been a long time since I've properly been involved and enjoyed Mario Kart in that way, playing online. And I'm there for it. Obviously, I would have liked Mario Kart 10, but I think this is a great option in the meantime that isn't too costly. I think £33 is... It's not ideal, but it's not.
That's the lowest Nintendo will go on the eShop. Is their 33% discount, right? Like
I will take it.
They will not go below that, and you also will not find it physically for any less than that. So it's just there's a bargain with the devil here, and I think like had it not been for the expansion pass thing, I might have thought twice about it because I'm like, well, 25 quid on top of the 33 quid that I'm paying, but like I'm already paying for the expansion pass, and so it kind of. And I hate to admit it because I don't want to fucking buy the fucking video game again, Nintendo. I want a new one. But in a lot of ways, right, like doing 48 new remastered tracks feels like a new Mario Kart in some ways, right? It's just giving you a lot more.
It's still 200 cc's, which I'm a big fan of.
And there's also like a bunch of stuff that was added to, in terms of characters and stuff that was added to Deluxe that we never got access to and things like that, which is cool. Splatoon, Squid Kids are in there. And there's also the better battle mode, which I know you're not a battle mode guy, Bally, but I will drag you into some battle mode, I'm sure.
We can do a bit of battle mode.
Because it's, you know... Mario Kart 8 originally launched with a terrible battle mode, like really poor. It was just on the courses themselves, and they weren't actual arenas. It was just really, really bad.
Like we should do like a top 10 strange decisions in Nintendo's history, and that has to be one of them. It was just such a bizarre thing. To
me, that read of like, we need to get a Mario Kart game out on the Wii U, but we don't have time, so let's just fucking scrap this battle mode and do a shitty version. Like, It felt like that for sure.
Because it came a little bit after launch, like it came like a year after launch Mario Kart.
Yes.
I guess that's launch window arguably these days, but
yeah, totally. But yeah, I do think that this in many ways is making it Mario Kart Ultimate, like Smash Brothers Ultimate, by like just putting the entire history of the series into this one game. It gives you the ability to have a fresh start next time, which I think would be great. And also because Kirby and his big mouth could engulf a car, and then that could be the way that he drives the next game. Yeah. Although ideally we would take a cue from Kirby's air ride, and he would be on a star instead. That's kind of what the fun thing is. Do you want to talk about Kirby eating, guys? Because I just can't get this shit out of my head. Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Obviously, we have seen a bunch of this game so far, a ton of it. It looks really cool from what we already have seen. You know, the first thing was like, oh, it's like a 3D Kirby game, and it's open and has levels and stuff like that, and it seemed like that's great. I'm sure it's going to be fun. Seems to be taking some cues from like Mario Odyssey and stuff like that, and seems like they went the whole way, because this really is just like the voring of Mario Odyssey, like Kirby just taking things into his mouth and turning into them, taking control of them, vending machines, light bulbs, cars, like name it.
It's a bit more parasitic than Cappy was. Like it's a bit more, I don't know, there's like a Disney style magic to Cappy, like, and capturing an Odyssey, whereas this just felt a bit more, I don't know, alien or something. It's just a bit more strange, but I liked it a lot. I think, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, I think people were already excited just by the world design and 3D Kirby, and hey, it's just like it's a decent time of year to come out, and I think this has just brought the game to another level of like excitement, and it is just done fantastically on social media, and I think Nintendo know that, and I like that the way this game is coming together, and I'm pretty excited for it.
Yeah, I would say like my thoughts on how good this game were going to be were in the range of like, it'll probably be like a middling okay platformer, and I'll enjoy it because it's 3D and it's kind of something new for the series, but ultimately it'll probably just be a bit of a standard Kirby game with, power-ups that you get, and, you're just going across different levels in 3D, right? Like that's kind of what I expected. And I think this shows me they're putting a lot more effort and work into it than I had immediately assumed, right? Like having quote-unquote mouthful mode, because whoever thought up that as an idea certainly probably should be fired from Nintendo. It's wild. Like it is so clearly, like as soon as you saw that, I was like, well, that's going to be Twitter for the next week, isn't it? That's all it's going to be, is people doing Kirby memes, and lo and behold, we are here in this time, and I think it really gives that kind of sense of that spark of creativity that we expect from the Mario series usually, right? Of what's this weird thing that they're doing, This for me feels like, oh, they're actually going for something a bit more ambitious here. It feels like they're creating, these transformations which inherently have to have things like puzzles designed around them and areas and spaces. Like, it has to be really, put together in a way that makes sense.
Make it more puzzly and less pure action, which sometimes
Yes.
what Kirby can feel like. I agree. I
Totally.
like that a lot.
There's the kind of the lift where you can lift up and then you can pop out of it and get to a higher place. Stuff like that, right? And using the light bulb reminded me of Yoshi in Galaxy 2, where he has the fruit that lights up the spaces and the disappearing floor and stuff like that. Like, if you're incorporating Mario-like ideas with this very Mario-like kind of thing from Odyssey in a sense, I'm much more on board with it even than I was before, and I'm actually legitimately excited for this to be a really great game now, as opposed to something that was like, yeah, it's going to be fun, but still a Kirby game. So yeah, I'm pretty high on Kirby and the Forgotten Land. It's March 25th. I think they'd already announced that date. I think we might have known that, but yeah, March is getting packed because we've got Triangle Strategy and that, and it's going to be a heavy month. So really looking forward to it, and the internet is going to again be ablaze with Kirby stuff whenever that does happen and the game does come out. So yes, did they mention co-op? I think they also mentioned you're building up the village in that trailer, which was really cool. Like, I like that idea of having a hub town where you're going out on your missions and you're bringing like materials and stuff back, I guess. It like gives a sense of necessity to collecting knickknacks and doodads, right? Like, what's the point of coins in Mario? Well, it was always a high score thing, and then in Odyssey it was your lives, but then you could also use the money in Odyssey to buy new outfits and stuff, which is a great idea. So like, having a use for whatever random shit you're collecting in a platformer, I love stuff like that, right? And it gives me Nier Automata vibes with like the apocalyptic world, but also the idea of like rebuilding a civilization and a city and a town and stuff like that. So yeah. Any other thoughts on Kirby, or should we go on to something else?
I'm excited about a Kirby game, and that means that Kirby is doing something good.
Yes,
because we're not normally that excited about Kirby game.
Bally, what do you want to pick next? I think I know what it is, but go for it.
I don't know if this is what you thought I was thinking of. I want to talk about Nintendo Switch Sports.
Oh, okay. All right. Sure.
This is shocking. And well, it's shocking, but also we have maintained on this podcast, Nintendo cannot resist the forbidden fruit that is the mainstream Wii Sports audience. And we've seen this time and time again where, after the success of Wii Sports, what did they do? They brought out Wii Fit. Like, what did they do on Switch? They launched with Nintendo 1-2 Switch. Like, they know that market's always there. They launched Ring Fit Adventure, which came out just like a couple of years ago, and did gangbusters. That's like on 13 million.
It's the number 10 best-selling Switch game, right? Obviously, Pokemon Legends Arceus is clearly going to usurp it and kick out of the top 10 next time they do financials.
Right, and there's now 5 Pokemon games in the top 10 or something. But
of course. But Ring Fit hanging on for that long at like almost 14 million units sold is crazy for what that thing is.
Nintendo will always come back to, hey, you know what? We still have it when it comes to like appealing to that really, really mainstream casual audience, and it doesn't seem to bother them that they put out the Nintendo Switch Lite, which doesn't have detachable Joy-Cons to play these games. They don't seem to care about that. They're just like, hey, this is another Wii Sports, and I think it also looks good. I think it's two things I said from this direct were RIP Mario Kart 9 and RIP Mii's, which is something I'm shocked that Nintendo has done in the year 2022. But, there are no Mii's in this game. These are like unique looking avatars, which I think is very shocking.
They're like Disney-esque in a weird way. Like, they remind me of those like Disney kind of games. There was one I think on 360 or like where you ran around a world. Maybe that was Xbox avatars actually. Like, they kind of have that vibe to them more so than Mii's. They're like more characterful, I guess, like more animated.
They look a little less 2007.
Yes, much less so.
And I think it looks good. I think, they've got bowling, golf is down the way. Again, similar to like the DLC rollout of Mario Kart. They've promised that there's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 more sports to come.
Yep.
And I think that's a clever rollout with a series like this, where sure, you'll get that initial bounce of users at the start, but then a few months time, if you relaunch a game like golf and then hey, my uncle back in the day used to love Wii Sports Golf. Hey, Uncle Richard, come and play this Wii Switch Sports thing. And it's like, it's just a clever way of trying to get back that audience of someone saying, I remember when we played Wii Sports Golf.
Yes.
That was great. And now you can play it on Switch. And it's just this kind of, this has potential to break into that top 10 for sure.
It's been like 15 years since the Wii kind of madness, right?
Yes.
06. It's like, it's well into nostalgia territory at this point, which is shocking, I know, to say out loud, but it is. Like, people who are listening to this podcast, some of them might not even have been born by the time Wii Sports existed, right? So, you know, it's definitely a thing that is very nostalgic right now, and I think people are like, well, why didn't they do this at the start of the Switch life cycle? And I'm like, I feel like now it kind of is that sweet spot of people thinking fondly of those games.
This is post Ring Fit Adventure. They've proven that they can do it with something else, you know, and I don't think, based on the lack of success of 1-2 Switch, they were as confident about this type of game back at the launch.
Yeah, it also doesn't seem like it's breaking the bank in creativity terms. It's just like, yeah, we're just going to do the same stuff we did then because it worked then, and we have slightly...
well, there's no Rocket League without cars.
Yes, of course, yeah, Some weird football thing where there's a giant ball and you're kind of tiny people. And
they ported it in from Federation Force.
Yes, yeah, of course, yeah. That's their obsession now with just football. It knows no bounds in Nintendo's catalog, and they also are using the strap, which I now own from Ring Fit Adventure, so I can use that in the kicking game, where you're going to be able to use that while you're playing football, which is a fun thing to do. Cool idea. They have badminton in there, which is one of my favorite sports, probably my favorite individual sport if we're talking about one-on-one stuff. I love playing badminton. And I don't know how they adapt it to make it feel like badminton more so than just a tennis knockoff, because in a video game that's definitely possible for them to do stuff like that. And
it's got tennis and badminton, right? So
so they have to feel distinct, and they have to feel like unique. And it seems like these sports are doing the similar thing that tennis does, which is to auto-run your character, so you're just focusing on the swinging. Same with volleyball, it looks like, where you have two people on a volleyball team. But we've got to take on the world as a volleyball team.
Well,
you know?
We've just been watching like 3 minutes straight of Koizumi and was it Takahashi just like going at it. It's like, what are we watching right now? Like this feels like, you know, Reggie versus Iwata years of Nintendo going on right now. Like this is just those vibes totally. It's like 40-minute direct, doesn't matter. We're gonna have 3 minutes of the two of them just playing volleyball like in this stream. It's just bizarre.
And then Koizumi at the end just like goes back into space to his home planet. He just like, I just zoom off the screen and it looks like an effect that I learned to do in Sony Vegas when I was like 14, you know, like, oh, it's awesome. It's so good. I do appreciate them bringing back that kind of like mini skit, as it were, and them just goofing around playing volleyball. You know, it's nowhere close to the full-blown like Yokai Watch parodies and stuff that they did in Nintendo Directs back in the day, but it's still something, and it gives me hope that they'll do more of that fun stuff, because I always like seeing it in Directs, even if people complain that it's like, well, we're wasting time. It's like, well, no, Nintendo had a set amount of stuff in this Direct, and you're just going to get that anyway. So anyway, Nintendo Switch Sports, I'm excited. The other nice thing about it, checking the eShop, it's much cheaper than usual. It's like a £30 game, which is great. Like, it reduces barrier to entry.
It's coming quite soon, isn't it? When's it coming?
It's in the summer, I want to say. It's April, actually. I think it's April.
But like, to announce a game that comes out in like 2-3 months is wild. Like, that just doesn't happen often.
That's Nintendo's MO though, right? Like, no other company in the industry does things like this, which is why when I was doing my Fantasy Critic League and it's like, well, unannounced game, I'm like, well, next Xenoblade, because that's probably going to get announced and come out this year. Lo and behold, you know, that's what they're doing. So Nintendo have a habit of doing this type of thing where other companies don't, right? Like, usually you'll get stuff like, oh, here's Gotham Knights, all right, 6 years later it's out, and Suicide Squad, and it's been delayed again, and it's like, you know, all these companies, they announce their games very early with cinematic trailers, and they never end up coming for a long time.
Actually proves that in some context Nintendo can actually be working on the game a very long time and resist the temptation to show it to an
Right.
audience, you know, like it's...
They don't need to as well.
They don't
That's the
need
thing. The Switch has proven successful enough to where they don't have to do their emergency directs that announce a sequel to The Link to the Past and Xenoblade X and all these other fucking things, Tokyo Mirage Sessions and all those things.
I think those were all in spring directs as well, I want to say.
Yeah, they were. That was the emergency direct with Wii U and 3DS where everything was dying and nothing was working, and it was like, we got to announce our entire slate for the lifespan of these consoles, so let's just do it now in one fell swoop. And it was a great direct, but then it was like, okay, well, they don't have anything else, so yeah, that was kind of a shame. But yeah, I'm definitely on board to check this out. We should also mention they're doing a kind of open beta, let's say. That's what other companies would call it. But
they want to test their servers, yeah.
Yeah, it's a test bed, like ARMS did a bunch of these as well, where you just have a free weekend, essentially, where it's like, between this time and this time, you can get online and play Switch Sports, and that's what they're doing. So, yeah, I will definitely be doing that. I think it's February 18th to 20th, next week. So, yeah, I'll be hopping on there and playing some of that before it finally does release.
Quick point on ARMS.
Yeah.
What's the Mario Kart team been working on this whole time?
I mean, they're just making courses, I guess, now, but like, what have they been working on since then?
I don't know.
They can't have taken...
Nintendo is the kind of company where their studios are kind of aligned enough where you get the impression they can just like ship people off for a year or two onto these other projects and then suck them back in, and like it's a bit more amorphous than, you know, Sony's 8 or 10 studios or however many they have, you know, like it's a little bit different, you get the impression. Yeah,
I mean, all the EPD studios work within that, like, those couple of buildings, or like there's the Kyoto.
It's like different floors or next door,
Yeah, like the teams are very much, they're very much named of like EPD1, EPD2, and it's like one of them's the Zelda team, one of them's the Mario team, one of them makes the weird Labo and Ring Fit Adventure stuff, one of them, you know, does Animal Crossing. They don't have like identities of their own aside from the series they make, right? To an outside observer anyway. So who knows what that team had been working on, or because they've had 5 years since ARMS came out and since Mario Kart Deluxe came out at the start of the Switch's lifespan, and they haven't put anything out, and now they're like, well, we're making these courses, but like, surely that doesn't take 5 years, right? But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it does take that long to get the perfection that is Mario Kart and how polished it is, especially when you compare it to other kart races. It's just like...
Yeah, and when you don't have like retro studios working on the tracks.
Of course, yeah, to helping out with those 3DS tracks.
They've got their hands filled at the moment, I think.
Yeah, just a little bit, yeah. Shocking that. But yeah, Nintendo Switch Sports, I'm excited. It's cool that they're bringing it back. Love Wii Sports. I spent so much time playing the backboard game in tennis where it would be like the moving backboard behind, and you just like volley back and forth and hit stuff on the wall, and I loved all those little mini games.
Nintendo Switch Sports and Mario Kart, like we're going to be playing online Mario Kart and Wii Sports basically, like in 2022. Like that's...
Well, the other thing I wanted to bring up actually is like, this is not new necessarily of Nintendo bringing forward Wii Sports, because they did it on Wii U. It's just that no one owned a Wii U, so no one talked about it.
Yeah, we were there for that. We had a good time.
Yeah.
But you're right. Just how many Wii U sold? 16 million? Like,
yes, not many. 13, I believe, 13, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was really fun videos that we did of playing Wii Sports online, because that's what the Wii U allowed you to do, is to actually have online Wii Sports, which was amazing.
Yeah, we should do another one of those. We'll get there.
Absolutely, yeah, with Switch Sports. Let's book it in. Absolutely happening. Cool. Is it my turn to choose a thing?
Yeah.
All right, so I just rip off the Band-Aid.
Do it.
Are you ready for a video essay? Okay, let's talk about...
I'm going to the loo. Be right back.
Okay, let's talk about Xenoblade Chronicles 3, motherfuckers. Here we go, baby. I'm so excited. This is probably the most excited I've been for a game in a long time. And I think part of it is because so clearly this game is a sequel to both Xenoblade Chronicles games.
And they said that in the Direct, didn't they?
Yes, it's like, this will do the future of the worlds from Xenoblade and Xenoblade 2. And I'll put a light spoiler warning on this so you can skip ahead if you want. I guess like my broad thoughts on it before we get into that stuff is it looks fantastic. I really like the art direction that they've gone with here. It feels more in line with original Xenoblade than Xenoblade 2. Although the character designer is the same, they have toned back, let's say, the horniness factor this time in terms of the characters, which I appreciate.
Replace the word horniness with anime. Like, it's kind of interchangeable.
They're kind of the same thing. These characters still have an anime flair to them, but like they feel a bit more in line with the original Xenoblade cast in terms of proportion and just like look and style. It feels like a blending of Xenoblade 2's art style with Xenoblade 1 more character design, and I appreciate that a great deal. The world looks fucking incredible. Like, it is just exactly, every Xenoblade game has that moment where it's like, okay, let's just show you these wide shots of ridiculously open spaces, and there are just like 7 or 8 back-to-back in this trailer, and my mouth is just fucking watering at the sight of it. I'm just like losing my goddamn mind, because I'm booking a week off in September and doing nothing but playing this fucking video game. Like, that is absolutely
you've got
happening.
a fallen arm theory.
Yes,
that you outlined on Twitter.
Which I might get into when we talk a little bit more spoilers. But just broadly talking about what this game is and what it's going to do. I think if you are someone who has not played the Xenoblade games before, it feels like, yes, you can jump into this one, but it might be a bit better to have some context because it feels much more directly tied. Like, when Xenoblade 2 came out, Takahashi was out there saying, this has no connection to the original Xenoblade, it's a brand new world, it's a brand new thing. Lo and behold, get to the end of Xenoblade 2 and it is like directly connected to Xenoblade 1, so he lies about that. So you can never really take them at their word. It could be very, very intertwined, and it already seems like it kind of is in a sense. But in terms of some of the more kind of mechanical stuff, 4 party members it looks like you have out in the field, which the other 2 games have had 3. Aside from X, Xenoblade X actually had a 4 party member structure, and you could have 4 mechs in that game as well. So it's kind of going back to that with these 4 party members at once. Seems like we have 6 characters off the bat, and they're from 2 different nations, and they're kind of like they'll all come together, it seems. Like they're on opposing sides of a war. It almost gives me like Romeo and Juliet vibes of, right, like this male main character and this female main character, both from these 2 different nations, having to come together to unite them or to like fight against a greater cause or whatever. Like very, very much in that vein. And yeah, the setup seems very cool so far. So now I'm going to talk like light spoilers for Xenoblade stuff. So the end of Xenoblade 2 ties in directly to Xenoblade 1 in that there is this one character who kind of unites the worlds in a sense, and there is the ending of Xenoblade 2 to me when it happened very much felt like, okay, this world has collapsed into a different reality, and the first Xenoblade ending also has like, they basically, the Bionis and Meconis are no more, and like they're in this new world, and it feels like those realities have kind of combined back together almost, right? Like the history of this thing is like this crazy science experiment that happened that then created these 2 separate universes, and now it feels like they're coming back together in this new universe that has been created. And so that's why logically you can have Melia, who is clearly in this trailer behind a mask, and Nia, who is also clearly in this trailer behind a mask, who are the kind of on 2 opposing sides of this war, one of which is a side comprised of people from Xenoblade 1, which is one of the crews of people, and one of which is clearly based on Xenoblade 2 people, because you have kind of Homs and Hyentia and Machina on one side, and those are the 3 protagonists of...
the Scots on the other side.
Yes, the Welsh, actually, I'll have,
Welsh. I thought that was also a Scottish fact.
There is, yeah, Mor Ardain. Mor Ardain is a Scottish continent in Xenoblade 2, and the Welsh continent, Gormoti, or Gormot, the Gormoti are the people.
I love that they did that. I love it.
It's awesome. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, the identity of the series, as soon as the trailer started, I was like, oh, it's Xenoblade because you hear the British voice. Like, straight away, it's, like, so clear that that's what it is, because that's the identity of the series, which I love. I just love that this is one of those JRPG franchises that is very British Isles in its voice cast, and, like, draws from that.
So whose decisions is that then? How does that happen?
Well, so the reason that happened in the first place was because Nintendo of America refused to localize Xenoblade. You'll remember Operation Rainfall, right? Yeah. Operation Rainfall was the project where at the end of the Wii's life cycle, you have these 3 big RPG-style games, Pandora's Tower, Xenoblade, and The Last Story, and none of them were being localized by Nintendo of America. Nintendo of America refused, and so the fans went on this big campaign to get them localized to North America. Meanwhile, Nintendo of Europe, saviors of the day, decided that they were going to localize all 3 into English.
We talk about Fire Emblem having a big redemption arc after Awakening and a comeback tour, as it were, but I think Xenoblade is definitely the one after Fire Emblem that was very much. I don't know. It's not like it was going to keep. It's not like it was ever going to come to the West or be something that Nintendo considers successful in the West.
Yes.
And for it to be at this level where it becomes the final announcement of a fairly high-profile direct, I think shows how far it's come.
It really does, yeah. Like, you think about it, it was a fan petition to get this first game on Wii to be imported over, and and only GameStop sold it at like limited locations. It was hard for people to get, but then they decided, okay, we're doing another one of these with X, and then they ported it to 3DS, and then they did a sequel and DLC for that, and now we're just in this place where Monolith Soft are like a core tenant of Nintendo and like a big part of the important aspects of that company, especially when we're talking about like them helping on Breath of the Wild, and obviously they're going to be helping on Breath of the Wild 2 as well with technical stuff and making the world work and everything. They just like are masters of the open world genre when it comes to designing spaces that are just interesting and enticing to explore. So yeah, the setup here with these two nations is really interesting to me, because you have Noah, who's kind of our Shulk stand-in protagonist. You have Lance, who's the kind of guy who I thought was an Inderline from Xenoblade 2, so I was struggling to connect it, but he actually looks like he's a Machina, maybe Hom's hybrid. And you have Uni, who is a Hyentia, who's basically a mix of Sharla and Melia, because she has a staff that is also a gun. It's a gun staff, but she heals with the gun and does magic with the staff. Like, it's a cool combo. She also kind of has like an accent that's similar to Ryan's in a way. So those three are like the Xenoblade 1 crew. And then on the other side, you have three characters who are clearly Xenoblade 2, because you have Mio, who is a Gormotti. She has the kind of cat ears and the Welsh accent. And then you have Sena, and I believe she's a blade. She has the kind of core crystal that you have from the blades in Xenoblade 2. And then you have Tyon, who he's the most out there character who I can't nail down, because he seems new to this universe in terms of his magic and what he does. He kind of shoots weird paper planes out of himself and has a long scarf. I don't think he's really tied to anything from Xenoblade 2, but I wonder if he's like a new technology kind of based magic system that is forged from this world. But it's been really fun to speculate on like what's going on here, because it is so clearly tied directly to those previous games. And you have characters, Melia obviously being able to have a long lifespan because she's a Hyentia, and Nia being a blade, kind of flesh eater blade, which is a whole thing I won't get into, but she also has an extended lifespan. So theoretically this could take place in a world that's like 100 years later, and it would still make sense for both Melia and Nia to be alive because they live longer than human lifespan, or at least Hom's lifespan. So knowing like whether Shulk or people are alive, or whether other people like Rex are still alive, who has any idea? I am just thrilled by everything that is going on here. I love the vibe of it, like this idea of the flute. The two main characters are called Offseers, which means that they're there to kind of mourn dead soldiers, and they are kind of in an army for that purpose. There's already like biblical references with like Noah, and like Xenoblade has always been like very interested in religion and like the way that ties into its world and its kind of characters and stuff like that. The game ending about deciding we want a world without gods, right? Like that's the end of Xenoblade. It's very much always been fascinated with those ideas, and this game continues to do that. So I am absolutely 100% on board for this. My most anticipated game for this year by far. And I'm in the middle of watching an hour and a half analysis of this 90-second trailer, and let me tell you, there's a fuck shit of ton in stuff in this game. I can't even say words properly. There's so much stuff to break down and analyze and understand, and I am extremely in. Like I'm into the lore and the back history of these worlds and what's going on. Incredibly excited.
November.
September, dude. September, which is like 7 months away or something like that. If you're not into Xenoblade, I can see how this is a disappointing end to a direct. For me, it's one of my favorite trailers in a long time. Extremely excited, and I think if you have not been into this series, I think it's definitely worth giving it a shot. The first game is on Switch now, the definitive edition, which is my personal favorite. I think it is the best one. I think it tells the most coherent story, has the best characters and world. And 2 is a great game. I really liked 2. Its combat system is exceptional, and it might have a better soundtrack overall, pound for pound, than 1.
Do you have an easy mode?
2, I think they added stuff like that in. I think they added like easier stuff for 2, but The Definitive Edition definitely did. Definitive Edition added an easy mode. I think 2 is kind of an easier game in some senses. Like, the battle system takes a bit longer to maybe get your head around, but once you get your head around it, I was doing like 3 million damage to the final boss and like killing him in 2 hits and stuff. So it's definitely breakable. Once you know those systems, you can do a good job. But I think like the main story of 2 is a little underwhelming. Like it leans too much. Like, obviously it's kind of, all these games have anime trappings to them, but 2 was just a little bit too much power of friendship that just it felt not as grounded or philosophically as interesting as the first game did. Like, that game has real bold and interesting ideas and great twists and turns that really knock you for 6, and this 2 just doesn't do that in the same way. The one time that I just was knocked off my feet was right at the end of 2, where it directly links to 1, and you realize that these 2 games are happening parallel to one another. They are both happening at the same time, and then they both end at the same time, which is why you can say that Xenoblade 3 is a sequel to both, because 1 and 2 are simultaneous stories in different universes that by the end converge into one universe, which means that 3 is actually like moving the universe forward for the first time, which is super interesting. I'm very, very obsessed with this, if you can't tell. I've been tweeting about it nonstop. I've been watching videos on YouTube nonstop. This will be my brain for the next 7 months until the game comes out. So, yes, Xenoblade 3, you could say I'm excited. Bally, take us to something that you're excited about.
Football.
Now tell me the backstory of Waluigi and how he killed God. That's in this game, right? That's what they're talking about?
Not really. It's I'm so pumped Mario Strikers Battle League Football, as it's called in Europe, which is the correct name because this is the home. Europe is the home of football,
of
and
course,
nothing can ever change that. So I played the Wii game. I did not play the GameCube game, and I guess it's been a really long time since the Wii game, and I guess Next Level have been off making Luigi's Mansion 2 and 3 since that game way back when. Also Federation Force. How could we forget?
Of course, shout out.
Shout outs, but I don't think this game necessarily has a ton of new stuff that I'm excited about. It's got like this outfits, costume system that affect your stats and things like that. The weakest part of the Wii game, honestly, was the motion controls, where the whole game wasn't motion controls, but then the special move where it was basically your striker versus a goalkeeper, and you're making shots, and as the goalkeeper you can save the shots using the Wiimote. I hope all of that random crap is out of the game, which it seems like it is. And you could really just tell by the animation style of this game that, yes, it is Next Level Games. And that has been since confirmed, like reports, obviously. And it just looks really slick. I think that Luigi's Mansion 3 is honestly one of the best looking games on the Nintendo Switch. And this game just has that look to it. And
it brings back the style of those old games as well, right? Like the comic booky kind of like gritty, like the box art for original Mario Strikers has such a distinct like gritty version of the Mario universe to it. It's such a style that stands out amongst all other Nintendo and Mario properties that almost feels wrong in a sense. It feels like they're breaking the brand Bible for Mario with those character designs.
And what's cool about Strikers is it's not 11-a-side football. It doesn't feel like FIFA or anything like. By and large, Mario Tennis, Mario Golf, sure, it's got like a Mushroom Kingdom twist on a lot of those things, but at its core, they are still sticking to the roots of tennis and golf. But Mario Strikers is just not that. It feels more akin to like ice hockey or basketball.
Yeah, I was going to say, ice hockey feels like the best analogy because you're just bashing people in the face a bunch in this game as well.
You're bashing them, and I loved, and you charge up the ball by passing it, and the more the ball is charged up, the higher chance you have of beating the keeper with your shot, which I think is a fantastic mechanic, because I used to have like my Wario based team. It was Wario and Toad. They were my units, because what Toad was very good at was Toad was very fast, but was also very accurate and quick and precise at passing. So you could do a really slick combo where you pass the ball around very fast, and then whenever it got to either a Hammer Bro or Wario, who were like my two heavy hitters, they would play the shot, and that would score the goal. And then Toad could also do this move where you can literally just jump over the keeper and score a goal, which used to drive Ali T up the wall, which was always entertaining. But yeah, I just think it's a really unique system, and the animations I remember on characters like a Hammer Bro, where the Hammer Bro is like literally hitting the ball like it's croquet with its hammer, and just there's some really unique, cool animations that Wii game had, and it had some great slow-mo highlight reels and things you could do, and it's just a really great system, and I'm excited that it's coming back to Switch because it's great.
Yeah, it does seem like they are implementing kind of super move-ish stuff in it, right? With like the big wind attack that happens where it's like in a hurricane and goes towards the goal. How do you feel about that stuff? Because when I saw that stuff, I was like, oh, this seems like Bally would turn this off immediately and not want to have it.
It works for this game more than like a golf or tennis in my view, because it kind of plays into what they're trying to do more, which I can get my head around. Like they had super moves for all the main characters in the last game.
Okay, all right.
Wario's special move was a massive fart.
Of course.
Of course. Why not? Bowser would like flamethrower like nearby, and and all these moves were work to your captains. And it was cool because you can pick you could pick between like Toads, Koopas, Hammer Bros, and like Birdos, and other characters could be your substitute characters. I guess Birdo fans might be a bit cross that Birdo was like a substitute character, not like a main captain character, which is interesting. But yeah, I'm interested for more details on that nitty-gritty, and I really need to rewatch the trailer a few times just to try and identify a few points, but I'm pretty excited for this. And like between this, Mario Kart, and I can't remember the name of it, was it Nintendo Switch Sports? What a name. Nintendo Switch Sports, just so simple but to the point. We're going to be playing a whole lot of online stuff, and that's not what I expected 2022 was going to be.
This really is the direct of like, okay, if you like sports stuff and like racing stuff,
online games, and Splatoon 3, we're going to talk about that, but that's obviously online focused as well,
of course. But also JRPGs, and I think me and you represent those two like sides of like, you're like, I'm here for Mario Strikers and Switch Sports and Mario Kart, and I'm like, give me Xenoblade and Live Alive and Chrono Cross and all this other bullshit.
I still get my Advance Wars 1+2 reboot camp. Like that's also a great bonus.
Exactly. Yeah. So yes, I mean Mario Strikers looks really good. I never owned those games. I played them briefly at your house, and usually, as happened with most sports games, got destroyed and didn't know what I was doing, and ran around like a headless chicken. But this seems, Next Level have such high quality bar in terms of their games, and I wonder if there is like a single player mode that is like rich and robust in this thing. The
campaign was decent on Wii.
Decent.
Okay. I think there's room for improvement, and I hope they can do something cool.
Yeah. So like I would like to play this because it'd be fun to do online and stuff and get into it. But I'm not necessarily gonna be 100% on board. But I'll wait and see how I feel about it when it comes out. But I'm glad it's come back because it's so many people's favorite sports game in Nintendo's catalog. So it's awesome to see they're making a new one. And now that Nintendo own Next Level, right? Like it's they have the wherewithal to go into their catalog and do other stuff, but it seems like they wanted to go back and have their first project be something nostalgic and something cool to bring back to the table. So very, very good. All right, let's get back on my bullshit ballet. Talk about Live Alive, Live Alive, Live Alive, Live Alive. I don't know how you say this video game's name. So this is wild. It's a old Super Nintendo RPG from Square Enix that Japan only, never localized into the West. Obviously there's fan translations and stuff out there that you can find online and do that stuff with, and I'm certainly in that crowd of people who are wanting to find old Japanese role-playing games. Tomato Adventure, which is the game that precedes Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga that Alpha Dream made. Ben Hansen recently did a great video on that, and he played through the whole thing, and I have that downloaded with a fan translation. I want to dig into that at some point. There's a bunch of old classic RPGs that were Japan only that have never been...
What's the Japanese name for Live Alive?
Live Alive, I think. I'm not sure.
Right, okay.
I think it's just the same. Yeah, I don't know what the title refers to or anything about it.
Just interesting when they use English words for games that have zero intention of being westernized at
Yes.
all. It's just give it an English name.
Yeah. It's strange, but that's kind of what happens sometimes. And so yeah, I hadn't really heard of this before. And you know, when they were showing HD 2D, I was like, oh, for a second I was like, wait, are they doing an Earthbound remake in this? There was like one moment with a town where I was like, that kind of looks like Earthbound, and I thought that might be what was happening and why Shigesato Itoi was tweeting. You know, turns out it's the most disappointing version of that outcome, but we'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, this game is a really fascinating thing where it takes place over multiple different eras of time with different characters. It's almost Chrono Trigger adjacent in that way, but all these stories are separate and you play them separately. There's a Wild West guy, there's a super futuristic robot guy, there's stuff in medieval times and like modern, and it's just like an era spanning RPG. Almost feels like this could have been the original inspiration for Octopath Traveler, of like these disparate stories that then come together and all these characters kind of meet up and do their own thing. So it's really cool to see it taking that engine, which is the HD2D engine, and bringing this never before played, revered by a lot of people, like supposedly one of the best RPGs that Square ever made on the Super Nintendo that no one really knew about, to other places, fully voice acted as well. I saw in one of the trailers that there's a bunch of voice acting for all the lines, similar to what Octopath does. Same with Triangle Strategy. They're really putting a lot of love and care into this, and to be honest with you, I take something like this over Final Fantasy VI or a Chrono Trigger remake in HD 2D any day of the week, because it's a brand new thing that I've never played before, I have no familiarity with, and so it feels like it's just a new RPG from Square Enix, even though it is just this kind of remade classic that no one has played before. Absolutely in. It just sounds like such a cool premise, and an incredible like look, because anytime they're going to do an HD 2D game, the Dragon Quest 3 remake, Triangle Strategy, this, like, Square Enix should frankly just do this with all of their old games. They should just make it the standard, because it kind of gets them out of the hole of people being like, well, where's my Chrono Trigger remake? And then being like, well, if we want to do something like Final Fantasy VII again, that's a lot of resources, a lot of money. You
have to do something like this, or you go for Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it feels like anything in between is a little bit of the ball. Well,
anything in between is like Chrono Cross, which is just a remaster where you just pretty up the graphics.
Yeah, which is fine, but it's not. Yeah, it's whatever,
the same old game. It just looks prettier. Whereas
and the budget and time it takes to make Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's kind of like the only game that has done that.
Yeah,
at this point in time,
I would say Resident Evil 2 remake is a similar thing.
The which one? Sorry,
Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3.
Sorry, I mean like in a JRPG context. But
sure, yes, yeah. You can only make so many of those Final Fantasy VII remake games.
Like one every 8 years.
They're also splitting that game into like 9 fucking parts, right? So their bandwidth for making something of that scale is not very high, which means that doing the 2D HD thing just makes so much more sense and is awesome, and I want them to keep doing it. It's honestly the only way I think Chrono Trigger works, because I think that game is so perfect as it is already, so the only way you can improve it is to like do it still looking sprite-like, because the sprites in that game is just what give its identity.
It'll happen.
I think it will. Yeah, it's only a matter of time. But yeah, do you have any interest in this? Because I know you're interested in the style visually of those games.
If this comes out, gets some good reviews, isn't overly brutal, and potentially has like an easy mode, I'm very in. Yeah, for sure. Is it coming out this year?
It is July, I think.
Oh my god! Like so many games coming out so soon, announced. Like this, it's such a treat in 2022 in a world of delays. Like to have games that just get announced to come out in a few months. It's pretty unique.
Yeah, for sure. Bally, what do you want to talk about next?
Very briefly, Advance Wars 1+2 is looking very good. I think they revealed that it has voice acting. I don't think we had that before. It just looks really polished. People, go out and buy this game, please. We need more Advance Wars. It just looks great, and I don't think it's going to do anything overly special for me, but it's just going to be really nice and chill to play through those two games again. And it's
one of those things, Bally, where first weekend will go by and you'll be like, "Oh yeah, I beat Advance Wars 1," and I'm like, "How you're insane? That's crazy." But somehow you'll pull it off.
But you do the same to me with the Fire Emblem. It's like it's so similar. It's so similar.
I think the thing that's different is that you rarely ever do that. It only ever happens with like a handful of games. And I think Advance Wars is one of those.
Yeah, I think it's been shocking when it has happened, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to like what else Way Forward can do with that series if they are entrusted to do something new, something different.
Yeah, it's a promise for the future.
Yeah, promise for the future. Go out and buy Reboot Camp, please.
Yeah. So I want to talk about maybe the weirdest part of this direct, which I think was the Splatoon 3 trailer, because it was Salmon Run, and it was more Salmon Run, but like it didn't feel like it was that different. Like there's some new stuff they're adding, and it feels like, okay,
you could have done that style of trailer with the previous Salmon Run. Like because I remember when Salmon Run was first announced, it was like, it's weird, it's dark, it's edgy, it's got its own theme. The salmon look really weird and it's kind of creepy, and you could have just said that about this. And honestly, out of all the multiplayer online games we've talked about today, Splatoon 3 is at the bottom of the list for me. Like, it actually is. And maybe that's my nostalgia talking with a game like Nintendo Switch Sports, but Nintendo Switch Sports, did you say it's going to be like 35 quid?
It's
like
30, yeah.
30. Like, yeah. Splatoon 3 is guaranteed to be 50, 60, and I'm tempted to just say, MBZ, why don't we just have a Splatoon 2 session, and that'll scratch our Splatoon itch and pass on Splatoon 3?
I don't think, no. I'm going to be in there for Splatoon 3. It does feel very iterative. That said, it's going to be...
I need more.
It's going to be vibrant online as soon as it launches. And I think they are making some good changes in terms of weapons and stuff like that. Single player is the thing I'm the most interested in personally, because I have never been a fan of single player Splatoon. I think they are bad campaigns, in fact, I'd go as far to say, and not enjoyable. And I want them to make a good single player. So I am curious to see how that pans out. That's the thing that is the biggest question mark still for me with Splatoon 3. I hope they can do something cool.
Have they said anything about the single player for 3?
They're just giving us kind of tone and world stuff.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, it's like the tube in the desert.
Everything is dead because Chaos won the final Splatfest and things like that, right?
Right, okay.
That's kind of the vibe we're going with.
Lore.
Yeah, of course, get into that backstory. So yeah, you know what, the thing is, you're right, yes, we could just jump back into Splatoon 2, but this is going to be vibrant day one with a lot of new players and stuff, and frankly, if you jump back into Splatoon 2, it's only going to be the hardest of core players still playing, so you'll probably just get destroyed, and it won't be as fun, whereas jumping into a brand new game always has that kind of fresh, injection of a player base that more people will be playing, and therefore you'll kill more noobs, and therefore have better fun playing it, I guess, in a sense. So adds to that value. But looking forward to it. It said still summer, I want to say, and didn't have a solid date.
God, there's a lot coming out this year based on this direct.
Yes, and we haven't even talked about the second half of the year, which I'm sure they'll talk about at E3, which could be savage. Bally, any other things you want to pick up here that are important to you, or anything we should chat about?
Let's go Metroid Dread update.
Okay,
it's getting harder and easier at the same time.
It is, yeah. My first thought was like, yes, Nintendo, that's exactly what everyone wanted, to make Dread even more difficult by making you die in one hit. And then they were like, actually, we're also adding an easy mode. So I was like, okay, cool, kind of two birds with one stone.
Yeah. Better late than never. Get that easy mode in there. I think that is one thing that potentially holds that game back for many people. So
it makes it now a blanket recommendation. You know, I can tell anyone to play Metroid Dread now, and have a good time with it. So that's really, really nice. And then adding a boss rush mode to it, which is good. That game is still fucking fantastic.
The game more or less already is a boss rush.
You know
Especially
what?
That final third, it felt a bit like a boss rush.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Room to room, more of those guards, fucking Chozo guards,
God,
man.
Yeah.
I enjoyed fighting those Chozo guards at the end. I was just destroying them.
Good game.
So yeah, that's great. Okay, so Sugar Sato Itoi tweeted before this direct, and Twitter was lighting up. People were like, "It's time, baby, Mother 3, here we go, it's coming." Didn't happen, Bally. Are we surprised? Not in the slightest. I'm gonna say, but Earthbound Beginnings are coming to the Switch Online services, NES and Super Nintendo. So there you go.
Earthbound Beginnings looks like the old style JRPG that I just have so little interest in.
Oh yeah, same.
But for those out there who haven't played Earthbound and have Switch Online, you definitely, now is a fantastic time to play that game. It is, it's one of our top 10 games of all time in our
tremendous
official TNL list. So it's an incredible game that is not to be missed.
Yeah, I do want to replay Earthbound at some point. Maybe give it a few more years or so, but I would love to go back and replay that game because it's just so good. It's so delightful, has such a unique charm and set of characters and a world. Absolutely adore it. And so if you have never played Earthbound, and you have the Switch Online service, which a lot of people seem to have, just check it out, man. It's really good.
But Mother 3.
Mother 3.
What is going on? So
I don't think it's going to happen.
The Reggie, what's it called? Robot Chicken. What's that?
Yeah. That was part of their E3 one year.
What year was that? Like 2011, 12?
It must have been a long fucking time ago.
But so we were being trolled about Mother 3 back then. And this just feels like another troll. And some people have said that there are themes in Mother 3. I don't know what themes they're referring to, but that it potentially isn't the most politically correct game in the year 2022. And that even if they did re-release it on whatever platform, it needs a little bit of editing around the edges and probably needs ironed out. So
I watched the Let's Play of Mother 3, I'm going to say 12 or 13 years ago at this point. Okay. It's been a lot. Like, I remember some of it and parts, but I basically have forgotten most of Mother 3. But yes, I think I need to go back and reappraise it at some point. I have, in fact, got it loaded onto my Ambinix, so I can go and play it if I wanted now, which... I wouldn't recommend anyone keep waiting. If you want to play Mother 3, there are ways to go play it. You can go and do that. I probably will at some point, and it would be great to find a way for you to play it as well, Barry. But yeah.
It feels like there's something about the game that Nintendo just don't want to engage with, and the fact that they are bundling Earthbound Beginnings and Earthbound together in their promotion, and they kind of did that back in the Wii U where Earthbound Beginnings was announced, and then shortly after I believe Earthbound was announced. I think there's just something about it that they're just not engaging with Mother 3 for whatever reason, and I think this is a good example where that campaign needs to just call it a day. Maybe I don't know. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. I think we haven't even talked about the start of this direct, which is maybe the most disappointing thing that I've seen in a while. It's like, yes, this looks military, this looks fantasy. Oh, there's the theme coming in from Three Houses. Yeah. Okay, they're doing a direct sequel to Three Houses. Cool. And then on screen, Fire Emblem Warriors, Three Hopes. Instantly, all of my hype fucking just deflated out of the balloon.
Fire Emblem Warriors. No hope.
Nothing gets me less excited for anything in the universe than franchise has a Muso. It's like it's a monkey paw curl of video games. It's just like, oh shit, new Persona game. Oh, it's a Muso. Oh shit, Breath of the Wild stuff. It's a Muso. And look. People like these games, all right?
Do they sell that well then? What's going on?
Fucking Hyrule Warriors is the best-selling Muso of all time. Like it sold like over 4 million copies or something stupid.
That's criminal.
I get it. People do legitimately like these games, but there are a couple of things here. Like, number one, it's been 3 years since Three Houses. Where is our actual Fire Emblem sequel? Because it's been long enough to where we should have one. And there's rumors that there's a remake, but also a new one being made. One by Tecmo Koei, one by Intelligent Systems.
Very strange it's been that long. Like, Fire Emblem was like almost annual at one point,
Yes.
It's very strange.
So that's a thing. But also, like... Hyrule Warriors ran like shit on Switch, and like there is diminishing returns when it comes to these Dynasty Warriors style games where Nintendo keeps funding them and keeps wanting them on their system, and their system continues to get older and older in hardware and cannot keep up with thousands of enemies on screen.
Are there any Musos on the higher end tech at the moment?
Yeah, there's lots of there's a bunch of Dynasty Warriors games that are out there. Persona Strikers obviously was on other consoles, so it's much better running on those and that type of stuff, but it just... Look, there's the franchises that they want to do this with. I would not be surprised if in 2 years' time they're like, oh, it's the next Xenoblade game. No, it's a Xenoblade Warriors, and they're doing that. Like, that's going to happen.
I am shocked we don't have a Xenoblade Warriors yet.
I think it's going to happen. It's inevitable at this point. Like, that series is so suited to a Muso that, like, they'll do it. And it'll have characters from across the series and all that stuff. It's inevitable. But Will I play this? Probably not, I'm going to say. I have had Persona 5 Strikers on my wish list for a while of like, oh yeah, might be fun because it's Persona and it's more story driven and I'm into that world. Hyrule Warriors, I did, you know what, I'll give it to them. I did kind of enjoy the demo. Like, I had a good time with it. It wasn't like anything crazy, but it was fun mashing action, which I was enjoying for the little time I played of it. And I think the one thing that just turned me off of that game was just how poorly it ran. It just wasn't... Didn't seem like a fun game to slog through.
Seeing the Breath of the Wild world in that style of game made me intensely uncomfortable.
Just made you mad.
Made me like,
yeah.
Oh, it made me a little bit sick to the bottom of my stomach.
See, the reason that Fire Emblem Warriors actually kind of works for this is that
They've already had a Warriors game, we should also say, right?
They have. They had a... There's one of the first Switch games was Fire Emblem Warriors.
You didn't try that, did you?
I didn't. No, I never played it. And I think the reason this works a bit better is because Koei Tecmo made 3 houses, basically. Like, it was their engine in a lot of ways that was, making that thing work. And you can tell from the kind of squads that you send out in that game, like just a bunch of armies of dudes running at each other. And it's like, oh, this just looks like a Dynasty Warriors game. So it kind of logically tracks that the characters and everything look very similar because they kind of are built on the same bones of what they already did with that game. So it's called Three Hopes. I don't know what they're going to be doing story-wise with it. There's always time travel stuff nonsense with Fire Emblem games. I'm sure they'll figure out a way to do it that makes some sort of sense. But yeah, unlikely that I'll play it. Maybe I'll play a Muso one day. I think Persona 5 Strikers is probably the most likely I'm going to get to playing one of those, but it will happen maybe. Seem like good podcast games if nothing else, so there you go. Anything from this list remaining, Valley, that you want to dig into that stands out as something that you might be curious about?
I think Triangle Strategy looks great, and it's cool that there's a demo coming of the first 3
It's already
chapters.
Out. Yep, it's already there. You can download it now, and you can play the first 3 chapters of that game, and then carry your progress over into the full game, which is fantastic. I know that I won't be able to hold myself back if I start that, so I don't want to start it and then have to wait another month for the game to come out. So I think I'm going to wait until about a week before the game releases, then start that demo and roll straight into it on day one when the game comes out. I think that's probably how I'm going to handle it. But yeah, it was a phenomenal first demo they put out that I really enjoyed. Really great like music as you expect from that team. Excellent art style and design, and the strategy of it really got me. Like, I really enjoyed all the different characters and what they did and all the stuff that they had available to them. Really challenging in a way that I was a big fan of, and it sounds like they will have like easier modes, which is great, so it makes it a bit more accessible. But yeah, very excited for Triangle Strategy when that comes out, and that's the start of March, so it's only 3 or 4 weeks away actually at this point. It's pretty damn close. So yeah, gonna have to be prepping my schedule, getting everything else out of the way. You know, got to finish Pokemon Arceus and OlliOlli and all that stuff before this pops up and takes my life over. And then I have a timeline before Kirby comes out. So man, I need like multiple Switches. I wish that Switch had the Xbox Series thing where you could suspend games, because it's been a nightmare. I haven't played Ring Fit in a little while because I don't want to take Legends out of my Switch because it's always in suspend mode, and it's an annoying problem when you have too many Switch games. That's my issue, and I wish that there was a way to deal with it, but alas, there isn't. But are you interested in Disney Speedstorm? Feels like we're dancing around this, but this seems like your bullshit.
It just looks silly. Disney and video games, they need more books written about just that conundrum, because they just seem to drop the ball consistently, and there's very few games that are actual Disney games that are like, this looks amazing, this is a really good game. And the whole Epic Mickey saga and Epic Mickey 2 saga, but like Disney Speedstorm looks like it could be onto something, because it's like free to play, which I think is a good start for this kind of game where it's clearly like online and whatever. And then it just looks like a pretty good speed.
It looks
like,
better than the
game.
Chocobo GP thing that we've seen so far.
Yeah, but the fact that it is going to be Disney worlds and Disney characters is kind of exciting for like a kart racer. So I like that. And there was a line in particular I enjoyed where I think the commentator says something like, look out for Mulan and her explosive maneuvers. And it's kind of like, yes, Mulan has always been known for her explosive maneuvers.
Yes, rockets, right? In Mulan, that's what she
Yeah,
did.
it's like, that's what that film's all about, is explosive maneuvers. So It was weird because I think they said something like Sully is going to be roaring onto the something. It's like, okay, Sully does roar, that makes sense. But then Mulan and her explosive maneuvers, I just loved that line. So very strange. I just want to give it a whirl.
It's free as well. That's a good
free.
thing. You know,
It's
you
free.
can just check it out for an afternoon and then be done with it and never play it again.
Exactly.
if it's
Just
not good.
Give it a go. Whatever.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of ports, a bunch of old games, remasters coming, which was one of my favorite things actually about this Direct was, okay, they're bringing back Front Mission. Like, that's really cool. Like a very classic mech-based tactical RPG. Always heard good things about those games.
Originally released on...
I want to say Super Nintendo, but maybe it's PS.
Okay.
Maybe it's PS1.
Right.
Not 100% certain on that. Don't have a huge Front Mission background. Leans more into the sci-fi territory of tactics, which is not usually my arena.
So many turn-based tactics games. My God, there's like 4.
There's a lot. But yeah, definitely on my radar for something to check out maybe. Chrono Cross, man, like between Klonoa and Chrono Cross, it's like they drilled into my soul and were like, NBZ is illegally playing these video games. How about we give him legal ways to play them instead?
Nintendo just have like a sense of when they're slipping a few dollars because people are, emulating games here and there.
Yeah, of course. I went through the process of setting up the 2-disc setup for Chrono Cross on my emulator machine, my little handheld, and I'm like, I've got Xenogears there, I've got Vagrant Story, I've got Alundra, like all these classic RPGs, Wild Arms, like loads booted up on that machine so that I can play them. And then Nintendo were like, well, hey, how about like a much prettier version that also has like all these quality of life things and will be on a bigger screen on Switch? And I'm like, yeah, all right, I'll pay you money for Chrono Cross. Fine, I'll do it. You got me. So yeah, I will definitely play that. The coolest thing though about Chrono Cross, this is called the Radical Dreamers Edition. Now, Radical Dreamers,
like 1 million characters.
Well, yeah, Chrono Cross does have that. Suikoden is a series that actually is more known for its massive cast of characters, but Chrono Cross has a lot of characters. However, Radical Dreamers was a Satellaview exclusive game that is a bridge that is almost like a text-based adventure between Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross, and was only available on this service that was a net-based service back in the Super Nintendo days. So there are Satellaview games of like Zelda stuff that is still not playable to this day because...
Is Satellaview going to be the next system to be added to Switch Online?
I mean, I would not be against it. I think it would be extremely cool for them to do that because literally, Bally, they had like almost like Link to the Past style things that they would put out.
Yeah, I saw a video about it a long time ago, and it was truly bizarre and beyond its time, massively.
Right. Yeah, and so people in Japan would like download these through the Satellaview system and be able to play them through the internet in the Super Nintendo era, which is fucking crazy. And so them like saying, oh, actually we're bringing back a Satellaview thing makes me think, well, what if Nintendo does this with some kind of Zelda re-release, adds it on as a bonus? Like that would be super cool because those are like the hardest to play Zelda games by far, is any of the stuff they did associated with that. And I don't know enough about it personally to know like what they'd have to do to get it working, but the fact that Radical Dreamers exists and is part of this collection is super fucking cool. Even if it is just like a text-based adventure that doesn't seem like that interesting, I'm sure that it's worth playing through if you're going to get this collection. Obviously, Klonoa as well, Klonoa 1 and 2 being remastered, and you will hear in the next segment me talking about Klonoa 1, because I just finished it. I played the PS1 version.
What are the chances? Like, what is going on?
I don't know, man. I don't know. It's kind of crazy, but Klonoa, I actually realized after beating the PS1 game, they remade it for Wii, so there was already a better version of Klonoa that I could have been playing instead.
Who makes that game?
Man, is it a Namco game? I want to say Klonoa is... Okay. God, who even makes that series? I'm not 100% sure.
But it was like PS1 mascot platformer.
Yes, it was like in the era where you were getting classic PS1, N64 mascot platformers, and it was a side-scroller in a PS1 era where usually you wouldn't have that type of game.
I thought it was 3D.
It is, but it's 2.5D.
Okay.
Like it's side-scrolling with we'll get into it. I'm going to talk about it
Cool.
next segment. So yeah, I'll talk about the whole game and its stuff, and it's really cool. I had a great time playing it. So yeah, I believe it is an Namco game originally, and a platforming series that also has GBA entries, which I have those lined up on my handheld as well. A couple of GBA Klonoa games, as well as a PS2 game, which I haven't really been able to play because that's not something that I can put on the handheld. So this collection that has the first game and the second one, both fully remastered, is awesome. So yeah, I definitely want to pick this up, if only to play the second game and dip back into the first one to see kind of the changes and stuff that they make. So awesome. There's one more collection here, Bally, that I am very excited for you to get a chance to dive into. It's Portal. Portal is on Switch. Portal 1 and 2. Bally, how are you feeling?
So this is both games together on Switch?
Yes, it is both in a collection. Portal 2 includes the co-op campaign, which I have never played and have been meaning to play for years and years. And
can we play that in person together or online?
We can do it online co-op. So I am very down to pick this up and for both of us to play through the co-op campaign for Portal 2.
I'll pick it up first, maybe get that first campaign under my belt. And
first Portal is so short. It's like 3 to 4 hours.
Oh,
it's a real short game, and it's also one of the most innovative games.
Do you think I can
ever
do
made.
it without a guide?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
Right.
Paul's puzzle design is just so smart and really it's just satisfying to solve, like super cool. You might need to at some points, but I'd say more in Portal 2 than Portal 1. But yeah, I mean, those are all-time classic games, and I think that it's a great addition to Switch because both of them are old enough to where they will run totally fine, you know? Like, Portal 2 was on PS3, and Switch is probably around the power of a PS3, right? So, like, it can handle it totally without an issue, and the first Portal also was around that era as well. So, yeah, no worries in terms of how well that will run, how good it will look. Which you might have worries about one of the other ports, which is No Man's Sky coming to Switch, which somehow this is in a cloud version. It's not a cloud version. It's actual No Man's Sky on Switch.
God.
That's nuts, dude. That's fucking crazy.
I need to download that game on Series X and see what it's all about. Cause
it's on Game Pass, isn't it?
It is on Game Pass for the time being. So yeah.
I own it on Steam. My old computer, I tried to play it on and it just couldn't handle it. So I don't know, the fact that couldn't and the Switch has it now, I'm not sure how to feel about that. It looks, the resolution you can tell from the trailer, extremely low.
Yeah.
But the idea of No Man's Sky on a handheld is just fucking crazy.
Cool.
So that's cool.
As if the MBZ brain harvesting hadn't gone far enough. Taiko no Tatsujin Rhythm Festival. So this is... Yeah. So do you have the Japanese game and this is now an English version?
No. So the game I downloaded is there's actually quite a few Taiko games on Switch. I didn't realize there are 2 games called Taiko Adventure, and you can buy them as a pack. I think they're on sale now. Actually, I might pick it up. But it's like an RPG style thing with Taiko, where you're like going through an overworld and doing songs on the overworld basically to like beat people. It's awesome. So I think I might pick that up. But this is another Taiko game with more songs basically, and it has.
So you already had an English game. This is just another English game.
It's just another one. Yeah, they're all localized. Yeah. So the drums though from Japan, I believe. So or from Europe. I'm not sure. I got gifted them. I think the box is Japanese, so I think they might actually have been imported from Japan. So
interesting.
But yes, the continued like list of songs grows, which is great because I've kind of played all the songs in the first game and looking for some more to play. That game gets very hard very quick, and the nice thing that I noticed in this one was them talking about replaying sections. Like my bone to pick with the current Taiko game is there's no slowdown mode. The only option is to speed up. And that tells you all you need to know about the type of people who play Taiko is there's no way to slow down, like learn the songs. The only option is times 2 speed, times 3 speed. How about times 4 speed on these?
You can do that in like Guitar Hero where you play the song on like unbelievably slow.
Exactly. Like I really want that because there are like certain patterns and stuff which are really, they just go by too fast for me to register to learn. And I just want a ramp to get to that point where I can play songs on hard without dying and not knowing what I'm hitting basically. Because I'm mainly playing on normal for most of these songs, and it's a good fun challenge, but I would like to be able to play those hard songs, and I just need a way to get into that, if you know what I mean. So
right
yeah. Awesome. The last thing that I thought was of interest to us was
save the last course for last.
Of course, the delicious last course of Cuphead. This might get me to just buy Cuphead on Switch because I kind of would prefer to play it on that platform as opposed to on Steam.
It wrecked my previous set of Joy-Cons.
That's a good point. I already own it on Steam, so I might just play it on there and just play for the DLC on there. But I don't know, handheld Cuphead just sounds like a fun thing.
It ran really nicely on my Switch. I remember playing it on that first trip to Japan.
It probably looks amazing on an OLED, I would imagine. Yeah. You know, those colors popping.
Again, like 2017 coming back in 2022, another game.
Another one.
This time not a sequel, DLC, but there's just so much 2017 in 2022. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, but I'll be day one on that Cuphead DLC no matter what. Absolutely fantastic game. One of the best games ever. So yeah, very excited for that when it does happen. Cool.
There was some other stuff we didn't want to talk about, but
yeah, there was some other stuff that got announced that was like, yeah, this is all right, this is here, but it's not something that we really need to dig into. So we're not. So overall, Bally, final thoughts on the Direct. How you feeling? Are you excited for 2022?
Honestly, like pretty close for a non-E3 window Direct. Like, it doesn't get much better than that. Genuinely, like I think that it's something for everyone. So much to come very shortly. Like most of this stuff is first half of the year, which is crazy. And so many new announcements, which is ultimately the biggest reason people get excited for Directs.
Yeah, for me, the only thing you could make better is change Fire Emblem Warriors into actual Fire Emblem, and it's perfect. Then it's perfect. Obviously, I think a lot of people are like, well, will Breath of the Wild show up? And I'm like, no, guys. Like, if they're going to show Breath of the Wild, it's E3. E3 is like the centerpiece when it comes to the big games.
Yeah.
And if you're going to show off a new Mario, let's say, or Breath of the Wild 2, or Bayonetta 3, E3 is where that's going to happen.
I am still fascinated. What is the big holiday game this year from Nintendo? Like, will it be Breath of the Wild, or will it be a new thing announced in E3 window?
Because Xenoblade is September, and they could have positioned that as a November game. I don't think it can carry.
But Xenoblade's not top tier.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think it can carry that. That's the issue. So they do have to have a November big boy. And Pokemon has come out early in the year, weirdly, this time, right? So what is it?
I think it's between Mario and Zelda, in my view. Like,
I
think we either get a new Mario Odyssey 2 or something else Mario that can have a quick turnaround. Or
wildly, despite the fact that we have known about Breath of the Wild 2 for like 3 years and we have no word on a new Mario, I think it is far more likely that a new Mario comes out this November than Zelda does. So,
Zelda is spring next year at the earliest for me at the moment. It's what it's feeling like, but could be wrong. Who knows?
Could be. And I'm not sure Bayonetta 3, as much as the reverence of that series gets, it feels on par with Xenoblade in terms of popularity to me. So I think it's Mario or Zelda this year at the end, and I'm sure we'll see when E3 rolls around, or at least the E3 time period, whatever we're calling it at this point.
Yeah, now it used to be E3, now it's just E3 window.
Yeah.
And in like 10 years' time, there'll be younger gamers saying, what's E3?
I only know Jeff Keighley's patented Summer Games Fest, friends. That's the only thing I know of. Anyway, that's going to do a hell of a lot of chatting about video games that are coming out. I'm really excited. Got me very jazzed. Oh my god, Xenoblade 3. My brain is just fucking pounding out of my skull. I'm so excited. Oh, it's so good. Xenoblade 3 is fucking...
I'm happy for you, because it's cool. It sounds like it's cool what they've done with the story of 1 and 2 and the way that it links to 3. I think that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, for sure. I would never recommend you play 2, Bally, frankly. Like, I just don't think it would be for
those
you.
who don't know, I played 1 much later, had a good time, struggled with some bosses.
At the time, you really liked it. You put it at, like, your number 2 game
at the time, Xenoblade Chronicles X, I really bounced off after about 30 hours, 20 hours.
Yeah, that game is so dense with systems and shit. It makes sense.
And then by the time 2 came around, I was like, I don't really want to engage with Xenoblade right now. So,
Yeah. 3 could be interesting, but I'm sure you have other things that you'll be rather putting hours into.
Busy.
Lot of stuff. So all good. But yeah, that's going to close us out for this segment. We are going to be back after the break to talk about some video games we've been actually playing, as opposed to ones we're excited for the future. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back. All right, everyone, welcome back to the second part of today's show. It's backwards day here at TNL, so we're doing what we've been playing now instead of anything else, which is interesting. But, you know, we kind of did almost an entire full-length podcast amount of chatting about the Nintendo Direct, so I'm sure that, you had to. People wanted to hear our thoughts, so we're through the other side of that, and we're here now to talk about video games, what we have been playing. And there's been a good amount of stuff, some new stuff, some old stuff, so let's dive into it, Bally. Both yourself and I picked up a hot new eShop release, OlliOlli World, that just came out. This is from Roll7, published by Private Division, obviously a sequel to the original OlliOlli and OlliOlli 2, games that I am extremely fond of and that you like, I think, right? You only played the first OlliOlli.
I did, and I felt like I had my fill with that game, didn't want to play the second game. I really liked OlliOlli. I thought the mechanics were there and good. I didn't love the level to level, and it just felt a little bit amorphous. And what I love so much about OlliOlli World is that it creates this world that, yes, that's still level based, but the levels all feel a bit more unified into this world, and there's some zany characters, and there's a little bit of writing in there, and it all just feels a lot more together, on top of the fact that I think they've taken the mechanics again, perhaps to like another level. There's a few more things they throw in there, and I'm having a really good time so far. I think that the world and the design really reminds me of like Donut County meets Gunman Clive. Like it's this very strange but nice art style that I think.
So I'm not into this show, but I know a lot of people who like Adventure Time have been talking about that as a big reference point in terms of character
that's
design.
A good shout. Yeah, especially like the design of the characters. Yeah.
For me, I loved OlliOlli and the sequel, and I remember very specifically a Skype call where you're just sitting in the background and we're like chatting, but I'm playing OlliOlli at the same time, and I'm like, oh my god, this is like the greatest fucking game I've ever played. Like, it was just so much fun. It was just incredibly satisfying. It is truly, when it comes down to it, right? I always talk about movement in video games, and at the heart of that is like, I think that any game that is just purely movement, I can be happy with that, right? Like that is like distilled what I like about video games into one thing, and OlliOlli is just that as a game, and I think that's why it's perfect for me in my brain. I just like moving, I like platforming, and that's what this game is, with really complicated and a high skill ceiling, while also allowing you to mess up, right? Because when you think of the old OlliOlli games, one of the core tenets of them was that you could just bail very easily if you didn't even hit the ground properly. So if you fail to hit the A button when you hit the ground with your board, you would fall over and you would end that run and you have to restart again. In this game, you don't have to press the A button to hit the ground. It just gives you more points, essentially, if you do manage to nail it. Right. So it's like an advanced technique to give you a higher skill ceiling, but for people who just want to play through the game casually, it makes it so much more approachable for them, because it means that messing something up or just landing without pressing the right button isn't going to screw you over, and it means you can just continue to complete the level, right? Which is, I think, really beneficial for those players who kind of bounced off the first games and thought like they liked the idea, but it was just a bit too challenging for them, when they got into it. So
you do say casual player, but I'm only at the start of World 2, and I'm already at that point where it's like these levels are kind of hard to even beat on their own, let alone go for the challenges and high scores, and stuff like the wall running that you get at the start of World 2. I'm already like, oh, this is pretty damn tough. Like it's
I guess to bring it back a little bit, in case people don't know what OlliOlli is, it's basically a skateboarding game where you are side-scrolling, and it has a lot of kind of platforming elements to it where you have to grind on rails, you have to kind of do tricks in the air, and you can like go on half pipes and things like that. And as you mentioned, there's wall running stuff that gets introduced a little bit later into the game. So it is kind of a side-scrolling action game, but with a focus on high scores in a fun way, and a focus on completing specific challenges within levels that the game gives to you, while also just getting through the level and kind of getting through the game.
Yeah, a base level, just getting through the level. Yeah. Totally. And it's very unique in that way. I don't feel like you can almost compare it to like an auto runner, because essentially a skateboard moving from left to right, is going and by itself. It is auto running.
Right, although you can just stop completely if you lose momentum, right? So you still have to be pressing A to give yourself momentum. So you do have control over it, but I know what you mean. Like, it has that similar setup.
Quite loosely, but yeah, I agree. And it's just a really great, mechanically strong game. I think we're personally having quite a lot of fun where we're going back and forth on like this high score on a level.
That's what I was going to say.
From early on in the game, and it's really fun. And lots of games have done this. I remember like Bit Trip Runner doing it before, where you can set a high score and then you see your other friends on your Switch and what scores they've got. And we're like tweeting back and forth, beating the high scores. Oh, MBZ did this, and now I have to go do this. And I'll admit, I'm still about. I think I got within a couple tens of thousands within you, and then I was like, I need a break from this. I need to move on with the rest of the game for a while, but I'll come back to it and try and beat your score. But yeah, it's nice back and forth.
Yeah, it was really fun because I think as we were learning more about how to score points and how to like really ratchet up your combo, we were getting better as we were playing the rest of the game. And so we kept coming back to this level. I think you started it off by being, I spent ages trying to beat this 46,000 point from MBZ, and I was like, well, I basically, I wasn't really trying to set a score there, so let me go back and really try and set a score. And I was like, hey, I did 65k, and then I tried again. I was like, I did 98k, and you come back and you're like, I did 121. I was like, motherfucker. So I come back and I beat yours, and then you beat me again, and then I got to a point where I did an absurd run of like 460,000 points, doing like endless spinning while also doing like grabs and one single combo to get through the entire level. Ultimately, that's where you get the big points in this game, is combos, right? So stringing things together. So going on a grind rail starts a kind of ticker where it's like ×1, and then if you go onto another grind rail, it says ×2, ×3, and you continue doing that. But you can continue a combo going by doing things like manuals, which is like being on the ground, but your board leaning forward or backwards, so it still thinks you're kind of in a grind situation. So you can only do 3 of those before you have to like reset it, essentially. And so the entire kind of basis of all these levels, and they're really excellently designed from that standpoint, because they have to account for someone being able to get through every level in a single combo, right? You have to be able to have that for people so that there's this really high skill ceiling. And so it is about learning that space, making sure you understand where you do this, when you speed up, when you want to take your risks of like slowing down, because if you want to try and do a bunch of grinds on one rail at a single time, it will slow you down to the point where maybe you won't have enough momentum coming out of that to jump to the next one and nail it. So it is this fine balance of like, okay, I want a high score, but I also need to get through the whole level in order to get that high score. And yeah, I did end up doing just like one absurd combo throughout this entire level, doing tricks and advanced tricks all the way in between. And it really is a bit of a tap your head, rub your stomach game, where you use the analog stick to do your jumps and spins. The A button lands you. You use the analog stick on the grind rails. You can hold a shoulder button to spin. You can use the other analog stick to do grabs. And so it's almost like rhythm game-esque, but like just trying to get your fingers to move as fast as possible to do all these things. It's really challenging, right? And you don't need to do any of that to get through the game, which is why I think it has this great balance of, for a casual player who just wants to feel cool and go through skating levels, it's there for you, and there's a really well built campaign with some interesting worlds and designs and spaces, but also it has such a cool skill ceiling that you can go crazy with.
I think that I actually did a run where I did more tricks than you, like my combo was higher than yours and my score was lower. So I think it's also important that you're doing the tricks to a certain skill threshold, but on top of that, I think it's important to land grinds and lands, I guess, like do it perfect rather than good. Because I managed to like get a higher multiplier than you and was still like 20-30k off your score, and it's like, right, well, if I'd landed every single grind and every single like land off a grind perfectly, I would have beaten your score. But it's just like getting that timing right. So you're right, the skill ceiling is like crazy high, and what you can do in this game.
It's great that you're able to actually go ahead and watch other players as well, so you can go to the top of the leaderboard for a level and be like, this guy has 1 million points, how the fuck did he do that? And you can just watch it, you can watch back that run, which is awesome because it gives that kind of information that otherwise you wouldn't have as a new player to you, and even though you might not know exactly how they do something or how they pull off all those tricks, you can see the cadence that they use for the level in order to get to the point where they have past 1 million,
Right.
and that's great, because it introduced me to like, oh, I need to learn how to tail grab and also need to learn how to spin at the same time, and trying to implement all of those alongside, which I did this for a while in the first game, was the daily run. They have that stuff as well. You can do a daily challenge, and I was doing a daily challenge and trying to beat the number one guy in the room, because they kind of group you together in a room of different people, and there was one guy who was ahead of me in the room, and I was just spending ages trying to perfect this run so that I could get the tail grabs in when I needed them and get the spins going and all of that stuff. And yeah, there is a pure like arcadey feel to this game that really satisfies me, and is kind of the purest form of video game in my brain. Like the movement in this feels so, it's just so polished, right? Like when you think about like the smoothness of the grinds and the movement in the air and how your character like spins and all that stuff, it just feels like a level up in so many ways from the kind of pixel art. Like, I remember OlliOlli looking cool and stuff, but I go back and look at it now and I'm like, man, this is really basic when you compare it to what they've done with this game.
Yeah. I think it's also important to say that this game, I think, runs really nicely on the Switch. It is still 60 FPS. I believe it can run up to like 120 on PS5 and Series X. But if the frames are very steady. I'm now World 2 where there's a lot more trees and I'm seeing like a little bit of pop-in, but honestly, like it's barely anything in comparison to like the way the game runs overall. And some of the characters look a bit stilted at points where and then a bit framey, but when it comes to actual skateboarding, it's fine.
I think that's actually a design choice when it comes to the dialogue scenes. Like that slow frame rate thing is actually in the other versions. It's a specific design choice of like, it's what do you call it when you do stop? It's almost stop motion-y in some sense. Yeah, which I think is a little strange. I will say, resolution takes a little bump, but I am mainly playing in handheld mode, so that's not really an issue for me when it comes down to it, because this is the type of game that I pick up, put down. As soon as Bally's on Twitter again, being like, I'm like, all right, pick up the Switch, quickly do a run, put it down again. It is a perfect handheld game, and that's really why I wanted to pick it up on Switch, is because of that.
It's also so fast moving that to try and judge frame rate and resolution of at least the background while you're moving is pretty damn hard to do.
Right, because you're focusing on your character so much. You're like honed in.
Because this game runs fast. Like, it's just a really fast left to right across your screen game. And in a way, it's kind of sad because they've really made an effort in like it's almost 2.5D backgrounds and things going on that just look really nice. Like the world design is just this really unique, as you said, like a Adventure Time kind of style. Like there's some really fun things going on. I can barely take any of it in because you're just so focused on that next grind rail.
Yes, yeah. It is nice though with the challenges, because it does encourage you to go back and see the alternate path through the level. And I think this is one of the major changes they made, was you can now switch between different paths at certain points in the level. So if you press Y, you'll kind of slide onto a more, they call it the gnarly route sometimes, which is like a much harder route that will sometimes have a challenge associated with it, or it will have a character there who you can meet, and that character will do a challenge on the map, like add an extra level to the map where you have to do, like, there was one I did where I had to burst a bunch of frogs and not miss any of them, like 30 in a row, stuff like that, where it'll just give you little mini extra challenge levels that you can go after and use. But I think like some of the language when it comes to some of those challenges is a little tricky, because some of the challenges you can complete just by doing them and not having to finish the level, and then some of them you have to finish the whole level in order for them to count as being done. And I don't think the game is ever super clear about that on an individual challenge level, which has meant me trying to look stuff up sometimes and being like, well, I think I did this, I think I did complete this, but the game is not acknowledging that I have. Like, have I done something wrong? And the thing is, like, when it comes to doing everything in a single run, sometimes you can't just restart from checkpoints, because it will have counted as you having died, like if you have to do a thing without quote unquote slamming means like dying essentially, it means you have to do the challenge and complete it while also doing it in a single run without having checkpoints and stuff like that. So I think it would be nice if it was a little clearer about that stuff. But that said, I do think so far the challenges have been much more interesting than the ones in the previous games, and unique, and like giving you stuff to do that isn't like balls hard, but feels like within realm of possibility and reachable if you just practice at it for a little bit, right? So like there's one where you have to chase these really fast flying balloons, and to nail it, it really is just about nailing the course of that level and making sure that you have the right momentum and speed going through that section, and pulling it off feels really satisfying, and it's great. And then it's also like, okay, well now I have to avoid popping any of these balloons, so I have to kind of take a different route than I might have done otherwise, and yeah, just making sure that you are playing the game and getting the most out of each of these levels, because it feels like so much design and thought has gone into all of them, that it feels worthwhile to go back through. And for me, I have been trying to do every challenge on every level. Now I understand probably by the end of the game it's going to get extremely difficult and will be hard for me to keep that up, but that's why I'm only in the second world, is because I've really been focusing in, as well as Bally and myself, just go back and forth like idiots.
Most of the time I've spent with the game.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if like at least a good hour and a half of this is just me trying to go back and forth with Bally on that score. But that's the fun part of it, I think, is like seeing yourself on the leaderboard and like going back and forth with people on your friends list. We're not really high score people when it comes down to it, but there are certain experiences like Astro's Playroom, where you got really into those speed runs and stuff like that, where, if there is a community of people playing it and you are really into that kind of core mechanic and that core loop of the game, it gets you. And OlliOlli World really has gotten me. So far, it's my favorite game I've played this year that's come out in 2022. Not that I've played a huge number of other games that have come out this year, but it is absolutely the perfect type of video game that I want to play, right? It is. I'm just skipping the dialogue for the most part. That's one thing. There's a lot more chat in this game. Before every level, they do some chat, and it's like, it's fine, but I just don't need it. It's just completely unnecessary. So I always press B to just get straight into the level, just get skating. I don't care about these characters. I'm here to skate. That's it. So yeah, that's really what I'm here for, and it's been a great time so far. So yeah, a lot of time I imagine I'll be spending with OlliOlli World. And
yeah, me too. I'm very impressed. I think it's just a great package, and there's just a really nice podcast game because it's just a completely different part of your brain and just
perfect.
Feels nice.
Perfect for that, for sure. Cool.
How's the Pokemon going?
It's a good question. I am now, I want to say 25, 26 hours into Pokemon Legends Arceus. Okay. Haven't played as much of it in the intervening couple of weeks that I thought I might. But, I think that's because I have been playing OlliOlli World on Switch as well, and so switching between them is a little frustrating.
You don't want to burn out either. It sounds
you don't want to burn out,
it's the kind of game that might do that.
And I have continued to really love it. Like I really have enjoyed going through these different spaces. I think there's a sense that it is just kind of doing the same thing for a long time, right? You're just going to different areas, and the new areas and the new Pokemon that you can catch is the real difference. And then you sometimes obviously get changes to the way that you can traverse the environment. So like the third area, you get Basculegion, who allows you to swim through water, which is great because it means you can then go back to the previous two regions and find areas of water that you couldn't get across before, like rivers and stuff that you couldn't bypass, and reach other areas. Like the first area in particular has a bunch of Shellos that you need for a side quest, and they're far off in a distant part of the island that you can't access unless you have Basculegion to ride there. So it's nice to go back and like clean up some of those older side quests and things like that. And then in the later regions, obviously you've seen in the trailers that you get what the fuck is it called? Bravery. Who can fly everywhere, and oh my god, that's great. It's so good. It's just like, it gives you that feeling that I wanted, like at one point in Breath of the Wild, to have that moment of like, oh, what if I had a Loftwing here and I could fly?
Is it Xenoblade Chronicles X?
Yeah, kind of feels a little, not like, nothing is going to match the majesty of that shit, because that's just fucking god tier. Like, holy crap, that game is insane when it comes to like visuals and splendor of an environment and exploring it just in the sky with a giant mech. But it gets like, it I don't want to say it's Pound Shop Zelda and Pound Shop Xenoblade, but like, you know what I mean, right? Pokemon is really trying its hardest here with its visuals to do something. They've done
the best with the budget and time they've been given.
Yeah,
like, you can't expect it to be much better than that until, Game Freak decide, hey, we're going to do something really substantially graphically, up there.
it'll take them a few entries to get to that point, and I hope they get there because, as I said, this is a great kind of base to build off of. But yeah, having that freedom of exploration, but also like it kind of solves the Zelda problem because your character can't actually, well, so they try to do the thing at the start where it looks like, oh, you can kind of jank your way up places, and you can do that with Wyrdeer where you're jumping and climbing and you're like running to jump and trying to make it through these areas. However, there is a Pokemon that you do get that lets you just climb up cliff walls like Link does in Breath of the Wild, and I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. So like they do give you the ability to traverse the environment in all these different ways. So you have a fast overland character, you have a flying in the air character, and a water character, and a Pokemon, I guess, that you can climb up sheer cliffs with as well. So you have, by the end of the game, the ability to get anywhere you need to, essentially. And that is really nice. It just makes it so much smoother to traverse spaces and to get towards like where side quests are at in the environment. And these spaces are pretty large. The last one especially, very big and frosty and icy, and a lot of space to get around, and hidden caves and all that type of stuff. So it's been a lot of fun finding things. I think for me, still the core of it is just, leave me alone with the story, basically. The story is cool, and I like where they're going with it. I'm close to the end now. I'm probably a couple of hours away from finishing it. I think I have to do this kind of trial thing. There's like 3 things you have to do for this trial, and then there'll be the final stuff, and then I'll roll credits. But, rolling credits in this game really isn't the end of it, because I think the core of it is filling out that Pokedex, and I do really want to do that and finish it. But I kind of want to get the story out of the way now so that I can just focus completely on filling the Pokedex out and achieving those mini tasks. Because one of the things I really like is almost strategizing before you go out. It's like, okay, I'll take a look at the Pokedex. Who do I have here who I can tick stuff off with? Okay, well, I've got this Skuntank, and I need to use Venoshock 3 more times in order to get that one up. But also, I could
like
use...
Nobody Saves the World.
Yes, it kind of is, in a weird way, but like in a way that actually works much better for me than that game does. We'll get to that. But so it's like, okay, I need to use Venoshock 3 times. I also need to use a strong style move 3 times. Well, I could combine both of those. So if I just use Venoshock in a strong style 3 times, that's 2 things killed with 1. Also, though, I need to, get this Wurmple. I need to kill 6 more Wurmple. So, what if I take the Skuntank, use Venoshock 6 times, or 3 times, in a strong style against this Wurmple, therefore I'm ticking off 2 Pokemon in 1, and also doing it as quickly and efficiently as possible, right? Like, I really love that kind of meta-strategic layer that you look at your box, you look at who you have, and you take a look at the decks, and you're like, okay, well, if I take a party of these 3 characters, and I can strategically go to this part of the map, knock out all of these things at once. It feels really satisfying when you go back to the professor and you see that little Pokeball icon next to each Pokemon that you've knocked out, and it feels like that significant progress being made, because also you're getting XP that ups your star rank within the thing, that lets you get access to like higher grade Pokeballs and all that stuff. It's a great loop, a really, really satisfying loop that that allows you to tackle it however you want, like, because you have that freedom of being able to go to these different places and take on whatever Pokemon you want and catch whichever ones you want to. There's a huge satisfaction in just knocking things off, checking things off a list. It really is a little bit of a list game, but in a way that feels satisfying because you are taking ownership out of it, right? Like, you are deciding where you want to go, when you want to go, and how you want to take these things on. And sometimes it makes more sense to be like, okay, I'm not actually going to kill them, I'm going to catch a certain number of them. There was one in particular, and this is really satisfying when this happens, even when it happens by accident. So I've been doing a lot more of feeding Pokemon, which is essentially... You get a bunch of berries in this game, right? And they're the berries you're familiar with, like, raspberries or leper berries or, the chesto, like all these berries that you know from playing the games, and you use them for certain purposes of like curing poison or curing sleep and curing paralysis. And for a long time, I was like, well, none of these are really that helpful, because in battle, they've made changes essentially to status effects. So sleep, for example, you don't go to sleep in this game. You just become drowsy, which almost acts like paralysis, where sometimes it will be like, oh, they're too drowsy to move, but sometimes they'll just attack. So they made some smart changes to sleep, because sleep has always been frustrating, and an annoying kind of status effect. I'm also not even sure if freeze is even in this game. Freeze might have been taken out. I haven't been frozen yet at any point. But also, those status effects not only just disappear after battle, like they're just gone. You don't have to deal with poison after battle. It's just disappeared. But also, they can, after a period of time, if you're in a battle for long enough, just disappear of their own accord. They'll just go away, and it'll just be like, oh, you just got healed of paralysis. Just out of nowhere, which is also really interesting. But it also means that, like, what's the point of these berries? And so it hasn't been until really later in the game that I've really found the utility in using berries to distract Pokemon, to get them vulnerable, and to position them in a way that you can sneak up behind them and take them down. And by taking them down, I mean, of course, catching them in a Pokeball, which has been... I posted a video of this to Twitter of an Octillery. There's this Octillery. He's kind of crawling around. I was having a hard time with this guy. He was a pain in my ass. He kept spotting me. He kept, like, attacking me. I had to run away and reset him multiple times. And I was like, okay, well, how about this? I'm going to throw some honey, draw him over to me, throw a little bit more, draw him really close to the grass, wait until he finishes eating, turns around, and then I'll slowly sneak up behind him with my heavy ball and just fucking chuck it at his back, and boom, caught him. And it was so fucking satisfying, that, like, kind of breadcrumbing of, like, it feels like you're manipulating the Pokemon. It feels like they are kind of under your control. And especially, like, the ones that are the alpha Pokemon, which have the red eyes and they're really powerful, they're much more they have better movesets and stuff like that, and they're harder to take down. Those ones are the hardest to catch, and so having ways of getting behind them, or even, like, if there's not any grass in an area, you can craft smoke bombs, and you can throw a smoke bomb down, and that hides you in the smoke and allows you to get up on someone. Like, there's a Garchomp I saw someone going after who's just, like, in a flat plane, so there's no easy way to approach him, and so you have to use stuff like smoke bombs in order to get the jump on them. But also, the thing that I really like about the heavy balls is that there's, like, a whole set of these different types of balls, and they act differently to the main games as well. Heavy balls usually in the main game were used to catch Pokemon who had a high weight class, whereas in this game they're used, if you get the jump on a Pokemon without it noticing you, it has a much higher chance of catching them, essentially. But the drawback is that these heavy balls have no throw to them whatsoever, so you have to be really close to a Pokemon, right behind it in some cases, in order for it to even hit them, which means you have to get very close in and, like, be really sneaky behind them to throw it and make sure that it hits the back of their body and catches them. And the same goes for feather balls. So, like, flying Pokemon in the sky, like that Gyarados I mentioned last time, if I had a feather ball, I could have thrown it. It goes way, way further. And I did this with a Magnezone, actually. There was a Magnezone doing this loop in the sky, and so I just found a place where it was going to come into my range, waited until it got there, threw the feather ball, and bam, caught the Magnezone midair. And that is so satisfying, just setting up these different ways of catching Pokemon. It really adds another layer of strategy and tactics to it. And sure, you can go in there and you can attack them and you can get their health down like usual, but to me that feels far less interesting than the more dynamic, like, action rich way in which you can actually approach these encounters without actually having to fight the Pokemon, but, like, using these tools in order to get around them, and like, having that catch when you get something that's level 75 or whatever, and you just threw a Pokeball at it. It feels like you have cheated, right? Like, because that shouldn't be how it works. Your brain from, like, years and years is like, well, there's a fucking Giratina here, I better get it down to one sliver and paralyzed and use an Ultra Ball 70 times, and finally I'll catch it if I'm lucky. But here it gives you that relief of, like, I caught this thing. I didn't attack that thing once. That thing had full health, but it's in my Pokeball, and it's the 75 level fucking Garchomp or whatever. It's awesome. Like, that is such a great distillation of why this game works for me.
Is there still, like, a chance that you can't catch something when you throw it from behind? Is there still, like, it's still a bit roulette?
That's the problem, is that you have to get them into these positions where you have fed them and you have distracted them, because if you just walk up to this Garchomp and just throw an Ultra Ball, he's going to break out of it in 2 seconds, right? Like, you really do have to prep and plan in order to set up the situation, and it's still luck, right? It still is
luck, right?
A level of, oh, am I going to get them? And then you get them, and it's like, oh, that's why it feels so good, because you have to go through so much effort in order to do it, and then the actual end result of doing it is just real satisfaction. So yeah, it's great, and you know, sometimes things work out with like a Miss Drevis where it was in a cave and I threw it some food and I caught it and I got 6 points on my Pokedex for that one catch, because the conditions were, okay, you get 1 point for feeding it, you get 1 point if you catch one at night, you get 1 point if you just catch one, and you also get a point if you catch it without being seen. So I had thrown food at it hadn't seen me, and I caught it, but 2 of those entries give me double points, and so from one catch I get 6 points to my Pokedex, and I wasn't actually aware of that when I was catching this Misdreavus, but it feels like you fucking cheated the system of like, holy shit, like I just did everything perfectly without really knowing it, and with one Pokeball, one catch, I get 6 points of that Pokedex filled out. It's incredibly satisfying, incredibly cool, and I also have been really taken aback by the boss fights. I think they're actually well done in terms of, they're definitely prototypes of an action game in terms of you have a dodge roll and you have these bombs that you're throwing at them, so it's almost like a kind of bad third-person shooter in some senses, but they have patterns, they have attacks they come at you with. The last one that I fought was just like staggering in its kind of scale that really shocked me, and I died on it a couple of times, and I was like, oh, okay, like I actually do have to pay attention here, and there's a little bit of trickiness in terms of using my dodge roll at the right times, and you know, knowing what attacks are coming and all that sort of stuff, and finding the windows to attack. There's a really nice blueprint here. Like, they can build out these action systems to make it something that is more focused in that sense, and has a lot more proper combat mechanics that you can build around it. You know, it feels to me very similar to what they were doing with Origami King with Paper Mario, where the best fights in that game for me was fighting stuff in real time as opposed to doing the turn-based stuff for the big boss fights, right? Like there's a big Octorok fight on a ship that you do that's really cool, and you jump out of the way of its attacks, and it's going after you, and you're using your hammer in real time, you're running around. There's a couple of those fights, and like I wish the game had doubled down on that and like added some more mechanics to that sort of stuff, because it feels so much more dynamic and interesting, and it feels like Pokemon is going in a similar direction where these big noble Pokemon fights are all cool and fun to engage with, and like, sure, they're not like the best thing since Dark Souls, nowhere close to it, but it shows promise, and you know, I think that's at the core of why Legends is hitting with so many people, is because at a core level they have really nailed the Pokemon stuff that you want from this in terms of just freshness and newness and streamlinedness, but there's also a lot of promise of like, but it could be better as well, right? So it rides that line really nicely of what is here is already fantastic and I already really like it, but there is also so much promise for the future, and I think it's kind of where it's special. So I'm really into it still. Gonna be going for that full Pokedex completion, and yeah, we'll probably finish it later today, roll credits on it, and look forward to doing that. So yeah, nice. There you go. That's Pokemon Legends Arceus. Definitely, Bally, if you get time this year, I think you'd have a good time playing this game. It's really fun.
Try and get to it. How far off the end of the Pokedex are you?
I don't know, actually. Like, because I've been going at a pretty good clip, like when I got to a new area, I would always try and catch at least one of every new Pokemon that I saw, and try and tick off some of them, because, you know, some tasks are easier to do than others. Like Swinub I just got to, and Swinub is like, okay, well, can I kill him with fire moves, because that gives me a bunch of points, and also defeating him gives me a bunch of points, and then catching like 3 of him, and I think I was done with Swinub within like 5 minutes, because there were loads of them around, and they were easy to do, so you just knock it out really quickly, whereas something like Cherim takes a long fucking time, because Cherubi are really rare, and they only pop out of trees, and so I got lucky getting one Cherubi out of a tree, but then Cherim has tasks associated with it, which you would assume would be easy because, you know, you have to defeat them and stuff, but you never see them. They aren't out in the world and easy to find, so the only tasks I could complete with it were using Petal Dance and using like agile style moves, but Cherim learns Petal Dance at level 47. So I had to level this Cherim up to 47 just to get it to learn Petal Dance, just so I could complete its dex entry. So there are some dex entries that take a lot longer and a lot more effort to do than others, and that was one of them. So I don't know how long it will take me, essentially, to do this, because it could be that a bunch of them are easy, and it'll feel really satisfying to knock all those out, but then maybe I'll come across, like, I don't know, Garbodor or something, and it'll be like, well, you must use this one move at night, and, you know, it has to be learnt at level 72, and I don't know yet. So I'm fine though with that, you know. I'm totally fine, because it is a great podcast game, just like OlliOlli World, where, you know, I can go around. Once I'm done with the story, then I don't need to worry about pausing stuff all the time, because that's what currently happens. Is if I come across a story thing, I'm like, okay, pause my podcast, then listen to the story thing, then go on. Once I'm done with the story, then I can purely focus on catching and leveling and all that stuff, and that's really what I want to be doing. So yeah, all good.
Nice.
With Pokemon Legends Arceus. Bally, we both finished another game that we talked about last time. I don't know how we feel about it. How do you feel about Nobody Saves the World now you're done?
I like it quite a bit. I think that there are some low points in the game that it managed to kind of recover from fairly well, and I think that's because the skill tree and unlocking the different characters in the game, I think, is really strong. I just think that the further I got in the game, the more I realized that's all I actually cared about, and the kind of design of the world and the world itself became progressively less and less interesting just as I got further through the game. And I think that ultimately I just cared about the mechanics, and it feels good to go and defeat enemies and see bars go up, and that never got completely old for me, because I do think the creativity of some of the characters, especially later in the game that you're transforming between, keeps going up and up and up. And I think the game game's just a little bit overstays its welcome quite a bit, and I know I ended up spending like 7 more hours than you did with this game.
Bally's time capsule, it's real.
Yeah, and I think you just ultimately you did more of the grinding in better areas than I ended up doing grinding, essentially.
Yeah, as I was mentioning with the way I'm playing Pokemon, you can kind of tell, like, I'm an efficiency person when it comes to games sometimes, right? Like, I will try and min-max in terms of doing things as quickly and as smoothly as possible. And so, like, I found this one cave where there were a ton of enemies, and I was like, well, I just need to level up all my character stuff here, so I'm just going to spend like 25 to 30 minutes here, just bash it all out, you know. And that's what I did, and I leveled and unlocked all the characters within a very short space of time, and yeah, that's kind of how I operate. So it took me less time, but also I think a lot more done with the game than you were, and I was like, I just want to get it over with and finished. And I went on a weird journey with this game where, like, I really liked it to start with, and then I got to this point where I was messaging you, and I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm even going to finish this thing, because I got to a point where I was doing this dungeon, and I kept dying in this dungeon, and it was just frustrating, and I was like, somehow I just get to this point, and then all my health just goes. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So I went off, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to level up some random new characters. So I leveled up Zombie, and I was like, oh, okay, the zombie is like more interesting than I thought, because the zombie, by using the zombie, you're always losing health, which I was like, well, that sucks. Like, who wants a character who does that? Yeah. But the zombie has an ability where they gain back health based on a percentage, and the thing with the zombie is it does so much damage output that its percentage gain back of health is significant enough to where it completely offsets the amount of damage you're taking from rotting away. And so, like, I roll into this dungeon with a zombie, and it's like fucking pissed. Like, I absolutely rinse this dungeon with no problem whatsoever, and I continue to do the same thing with the zombie in like 3 other dungeons. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm just playing with this character for the rest of the game, because no one else is close to how powerful this thing is. And obviously the game kind of locks you off in certain senses. There are dungeons at the end where you have to have specific damage types in order to take them on, and so you always have to have someone whose like base damage is at least one of those, because otherwise you're going to have a really hard time to build up your meters in order to kind of do special moves. So yeah, the zombie was great and like got me through the back half of that game, but also I did unlock a bunch of the other characters, and there's some really cool stuff in there. Like Necromancer is cool, and the monk I really like a lot, but at the end of the day, I think, I was having a bad time, then a good time, then a really bad time, then a really good time, and then just kind of middled on it by the end, and I enjoyed it, but I don't know. For me, this is the weakest Drinkbox game. I think it tries really interesting stuff and is cool overall, but I definitely had cooled on it by the end and was happy to be done with it almost.
Yeah, I broadly agree. I definitely had like highs and lows, and I got really stuck in one dungeon, and then I got another character that I was like, oh, I really like this character, and then I found the robot was like my go-to by the end of the game and for the final boss and things like that, and it did feel good, but it in a way where when like Guacamelee came out, it was like regardless of how mechanically strong that game was or wasn't, it felt like at the time the Drinkbox style felt fresh and like the writing was funny, and regardless of anything mechanically, that game just felt really fresh and nice. Whereas I don't feel like that Drinkbox style is what it felt like when we first discovered it, a decade ago, almost. And it feels like while mechanically this is quite a new game for them, I don't know if that style that they go for is what it used to be, and I'd like to see them try. I kind of liked how serious in a way Severed was, and like that game was just so different. And
yeah, like looking back at it now, I think Severed is my favorite Drinkbox game overall.
Wow, really?
Like
right.
I loved Severed, and I think it's so unique and innovative and interesting, and just this kind of weird mashup of ideas that really works and is satisfying mechanically, and like doesn't outstay its welcome. Whereas, like I think Guacamelee, as we both chatted about, has been surpassed in the Metroidvania space, and like going back to Guacamelee 2, it like kind of reminded me that it was good, but it's just not quite up there anymore in terms of quality. So for me, I think Severed is probably their best game, which is surprising.
Yeah, I go between like Severed or Guacamelee 1, and then this game just it does some cool things. I think the opening 3-4 hours are really fresh and nice, and as you're leveling up things and the world's opening up, and you're like, this is cool. But then, that final 5 hours or so it was for me just for like, I'm not feeling this in the way I was, and that's a shame.
I think like some of the annoyance for me with like getting a character to A rank, like because you could get a character to C really easily by just doing basic attacks and stuff like that. And then it was like, okay, we'll break this ward specifically with this character who doesn't really have an attack for that. So you have to give them a specific attack from someone else. But then it's like, well, none of the dungeons that had those wards are available to me because they were all closed off after you've done them. So it's like, well, how do I find a section where there are dark wards that I want to break with this specific character? And it was really annoying, like some of those quests were just like, well, I just have to think too much to find this specific quest, and I don't want to, like I just want to keep hitting stuff and getting rewarded for just hitting stuff without having to think too much about it. And I think it was that level of those specific types of quests in particular that made me frustrated with some of the game's design, not giving you enough spaces, right? I just don't think the world is big enough to go and grind in places just by walking across it. Like there aren't enough enemies popping up.
I mean, that's what I did, but as I've proven that means you end up spending a lot more time with the game. So I think you were smarter in going to some of these dungeons because
I saw that future, Bally. I saw that 7 extra hours future where I just wandered around the world map, and I'm like, no, this isn't going to work. I need to find a grinding spot. So I found a grinding spot and I did it, and it was much more efficient. And yeah, I think that is a weakness of the game because there aren't enough dungeon spaces for you to level up everybody to the point where you want or you can get them to maximum before the end of the game, right? And like the locking off with the number of wand things that you need to get to open the doors, like I bought as many of those as I could from the vendor, stuff like that, just trying to, you kind of had to, right, in order to get to the end of the game. You basically have to unlock every character because you get those easy quests.
The game very much forces you to at least get to like C, B, and A rank and a lot of characters to ensure that you've got enough stars essentially to unlock the next dungeon and end the game. So I mean, I'd recommend it to people who just absolutely love dungeon crawling action kind of RPG games, but I think that for someone like me who doesn't necessarily play many games like that, like it's a good game. I enjoyed my time with it. I don't know. I'm not overly impressed, and it's, as you say, it feels like, wow, this was actually made by Drinkbox. It's like, wow, that normally they're, I don't know, better than this. It just felt a little bit.
I don't know. Yeah, I think the quality is, it's really polished. Like, it looks nice. Sounds good. Has great like polish to it. I think there's just a repetitiveness, right? Like, and I think if you're going to do repetitiveness, you can't have the game be 20 hours long. It's just, it feels like by the end it just grinds a bit to a halt. When it comes to like, none of the dungeons are interestingly designed. They're all just like spaces you walk through and kill enemies, and there's just no thought in terms of like puzzle or any, like, it's pure.
There's no checkpointing. Like, there's only one checkpoint before the boss in every dungeon. So when you're dying, you are going back. And honestly, I didn't mind dying in dungeons that weren't the dungeons where it stopped you from leveling up. So there's like 4 or 5 dungeons in the game where you don't level up in those dungeons, and it's basically like a test of your ability to get through. And I didn't mind so much. That was honestly a lot of the grinding I ended up doing in the game, was going into a dungeon, leveling up a bit, and then dying, and just going again and again, leveling up and up and up and up, and then eventually I'd beat the dungeon, and all the deaths didn't feel wasted because I'd gained so many levels on the way, and that felt fine. But I would have liked some more interesting dungeons.
Yeah, for sure. So yes, that's Nobody Saves the World. I'm sure it will come to Switch later this year, and yeah, it's like I would say, like, wait for a sale on this game, right? That's kind of where I'm at with it. Like,
I think it's worth it for that, for sure. I think maybe I was overly harsh a minute ago, but like, it's a good game. It's a good game.
Yeah, it's a good game. Okay, I've been playing some more old stuff, wouldn't you know it, and digging back into the catalogue of GBA and PS1 games, and I picked out of a hat this time Sonic Advance 2, Bally. It was weird because, like, I got this new handheld, and like the first thing I booted up was like not some like amazing RPG that I wanted to play or anything. I just went to Sonic Advance 2 because I was like, you know what, Sonic Advance, man, that's a childhood game that I have a lot of nostalgia for. What's your like abiding memory of Sonic Advance, Bally? Because we played a lot of it.
That it's a pretty good platformer, and Chow Gardens.
Yes, the Chow Garden.
Basically, all I remember, and then obviously it linked up to Sonic Adventure 2 Battle.
Yes, of course. My abiding memory of playing Sonic Advance 2 was the leisure centre that we all went to, where we would go swimming and we would play badminton or tennis or whatever, and then afterwards everyone would be sitting outside. And Sonic Advance 2 was the game of that era, and that's what we were all playing. And I remember beating it with all the characters and getting all the endings, all the characters to unlock the final stuff, trying to get all the Chaos Emeralds in it. But yeah, I have a real strong tie of, like, when I think of Sonic Advance 2, I think of myself sitting in that place playing it on my GBA. That's my abiding memory of it. So good memories associated with Sonic Advance. So I'd never played any of the sequels, and Advance 2 came out and Advance 3 came out, and we never kind of got to those. And I thought, you know what, let's see how these games are, how they've held up, and how Sonic Advance kind of progressed from that first game. And so, like, I think it's largely quite similar in a lot of ways. Like, level design wise, it feels a lot like they are building on stuff from the first game and just doing similar zones. There's some stuff that's a bit more interesting from a visual perspective. I think one of the last levels is a kind of like almost computer land where things are like techno and green, and like there's a lot of weird lights and colors going on, and it feels almost like you're inside a it's like an 80s version of, you know, what people thought computers looked like inside of them, that type of thing, and that's cool. There's also the bad stuff, which is big sky levels. Like, I remember, I think it was World 6 in Sonic Advance, where it's the big one in the sky where you can fall down to your death really easily if you don't make jumps and if you mess up off the side. There's another kind of sky level here where you have to really go down this specific path in order to avoid taking a dive into the depths and just basically instantly losing a life. And yeah, it gets frustrating, and that continued to happen quite a lot. Like, I actually had to look up, like, how do I get through this level as Sonic? Because the way they designed these games actually back in the day was making sure that you could traverse them in different ways with different characters, because obviously Knuckles can glide and clang onto walls, Tails can float at high places, Amy Rose can use her hammer. Amy Rose, I don't think is in this game. They replaced Amy Rose with Cream. I think this might be the first appearance of Cream the Rabbit. And I didn't really play as her that much. I mainly just played the story as Sonic, and you know, haven't gone back.
What's her special ability?
I actually can't remember. A hammer?
It must be ear related.
Might be, yeah. I'm not actually. I would have to go back and check. And we're not 12 anymore, so I'm not playing. Or I don't know how old we were, 9 or something. When we played Sonic Advance. I'm not going back and replaying the whole game and getting all the Chaos Emeralds with all the characters. I'm just not. I don't have time for that anymore. Just wanted to play through it once with Sonic and. Yeah, but you do have those options. But the thing is like trying to find the path that works is weird. But also like they have added new stuff to Sonic's moveset that I didn't really know about, and so I realized while watching a video that you can kind of double jump, but you can only do it when Sonic is like upright and not when he's in a ball. So if he's upright going through the air and has gone off a jump, you can hold a shoulder button and up, and he will like put his fist in the air and do like an extra jump, which is super weird. He also does like a drop dash style thing where you can bounce down to the ground on top of an enemy's head to do damage. So there's a few extra wrinkles added in the formula. Like there's a dash on the ground. If you like duck down and then press the B button, he does like a kick forward dash. Yeah, adding a few more things to the arsenal to vary it up. But I didn't really end up using a lot of that stuff. I mainly was just like rushing through levels and doing the kind of Sonic Advance stuff that I did back in the day. And yeah, I enjoyed it. It's one of those games that I was playing on my commute a lot of like, I don't need to have the volume up for this. I know what Sonic music is like. Just playing it on my tube ride, and that was good fun. But also the boss fights I was a little underwhelmed by, because Sonic Advance 1 has like a variety of bosses. I remember in particular the end of like level 7, there's an evil Knuckles or an evil version of yourself that you fight, depending on what character you're playing as. You either fight as an evil Sonic or Knuckles or Tails or whoever, and they're like a Shadow Link version of you. And I remember that boss fight. It's like actually it might be a Metal version as well. I think Metal Sonic pops up as well in that game. But every boss fight was like slightly different. Like some of them were Eggman on a single screen, like swinging a ball, or some of them were a chase sequence, and some of them were like just fighting in this arena. There was always like an interesting setup for the bosses. And this game, all the bosses have the same format, which is you're running to the right and Eggman is in some kind of contraption and he's either throwing stuff behind him at you, or there's this thing you have to avoid and you have to get close enough to him to where you can hit him, and you are collecting rings as you go. It's like an infinite loop basically of you just going along this level. You're just constantly running and trying to hit him, and it just got very old very fast. And it's just that because it's the same setup for every boss fight, it just doesn't feel as interesting and didn't feel as fun in that way.
Is this the first Sonic you've played since Mania?
Probably is, yeah. I think.
How does it compare to that? Does it hold up in the same way, or is Mania like this other level kind of?
I do think that Sonic Mania is the best Sonic game by a pretty wide margin, I'm going to say. But I do think that the Sonic Advance games they don't get a bad rap. They just don't get any rap because nobody talks about them, right? Like when you think about...
People just seem to care about the Mega Drive games. Like
you think about this era of Sonic, right? Sonic is doing adventure and heroes and all that stuff. And so when people talk about Sonic from this era, they're like, well, Sonic was always bad during this era. There's nothing good, and there hasn't been anything good for years, since the Mega Drive, since the Genesis, all that stuff.
Game Boy Advance games just weren't reviewed and talked about in the same way as
console games? It's almost like
games.
People ignored handheld games when they talk about this
Until
stuff.
the Switch came, basically.
Yes, basically. So it's a wild thing that happened, but like, for my money, the handheld games were the best Sonic games in years at that point in time. When you compare it to whatever else is going on, Sonic Advance, still really good. It has problems, still really good. Sonic Advance 2 has more problems for me personally, still really good fun. So, I think Sonic Mania is, from a design standpoint and from levels and bosses and all that stuff, a step above. I really think that game is excellent and the best Sonic game overall. I am very fond of the Sonic Rush game and obviously the advanced games. Like, they're great, they're really good, they're the best Sonic that you could have gotten at this era in time. It's just that nobody fucking talks about them ever. So yes, I still think it was fun to go back to, even if it has aged like not as well. Overall, it's good. Sonic's still good. I didn't find any Chaos Emeralds, didn't find any hidden paths. They must have been really well hidden because I did a good amount of like going around the levels and trying to find that stuff, but yeah, wasn't able to find any. So there you go. Sonic Advance 2. The last thing I want to talk about is, obviously, a returning franchise now, given the Direct. It's Klonoa. The first Klonoa, Door to Phantomile, it's called, on PS1.
The what?
Door to Phantomile, Bally.
Okay,
Come on, get the subtitle correct.
I thought you said daughter. I was like, okay, here we go again.
Oh, this is Bally's Grand Theft Daughter all over again. Yeah, just bringing back
Daughter.
real bad memories. If you don't know, I don't know.
Bally's daughter murdering people on the street.
Exactly, yeah. If you don't, I'm not sure if we ever brought this up on the podcast, but Bally back in the day, when people at school were talking about Grand Theft Auto, he heard it as Grand Theft Daughter. So for years, Bally thought the Grand Theft Auto was called Grand Theft Daughter. So.
It's just all our friends that age. Just their very posh accents. You can't tell the difference between Grand Theft Auto and Grand Theft Daughter.
Grand Theft Daughter. Grand Theft Daughter. Oh yes, Grand Theft Daughter.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yes, no. Door to Phantomile is the subtitle here. And so yeah, I was looking at PS1 games to load up onto my handheld, and I was doing all the RPGs, including Chrono Cross and all these other ones, and I was like, oh, Klonoa, that's like a classic platformer that I don't really know much about. I like platformers, and I want to find out a bit more about this weird bunny guy. So I did. I loaded it up, and man, this game's great. I really, really enjoy Klonoa, and I think that it's great that it's coming back, because I think it does something that's a little bit interesting in the space, and was trying to kind of break a bit of new ground in terms of the type of platformer that was being made back then. Because you think of like Sonic and Mario and Spyro and Crash, and they're all kind of doing different things in this era of video games, and they're all kind of trying to do 3D in their own unique way, right? And Klonoa was like, okay, but what if we do 2D, but we make it like slightly 3D? So we kind of like are on this verge of this 2.5D idea, and I think it's one of those first games to do the 2.5D kind of platforming in a really unique and interesting way, because it's not just a visual thing where it's polygonal and you can see backgrounds. There are like parts where the level turns and you twist around corners, and like there is geometry there that like makes it cyclical in a way, and like level design wise worked from that perspective, which is very cool, and it looks really nice. And from a visual standpoint, I think it holds up really well. Like as a PS1 game, it's a side scroller. Klonoa is still like a sprite basically, and a lot of the enemies are, but the geometry of the levels are all polygonal. So it's this nice kind of mashup that a lot of games were doing at the time. Look at Mario Kart 64, and that was sprite based karts with polygonal levels, and that's kind of what we have here, just in a 2D setting instead. And the core mechanic of this game is probably the thing that makes it special, because the idea is that you have this ring that Klonoa throws out. It's this kind of short-range thing in front of you, but instead of killing enemies, what it does is it grabs enemies, and they kind of blow up in your hands above you. And so when you grab an enemy, you can then throw them as a projectile, which can hit switches, it can hit enemies in front of you. You can also, there's a perspective thing where Klonoa can face towards the camera and face away from the camera, even though you can't go to a there's no Z-axis going back and forth into the game world, but you can face into the distance and you can face forwards, and sometimes there are switches in the background, so you have to press the up button in order to face forward and then throw an enemy behind you essentially into the background to hit a switch. So like there's a little bit of that stuff happening in this 2.5D space, which gives it that sense of depth, which is really cool. But also you can use these enemies as platforming assistants. So if you are holding an enemy and you get up to a place and you're like, I can't make it to that jump because it's too high for me, if you jump and then press A again, Klonoa will jump in the air and then will basically double jump off of the enemy. So use the enemy as a bouncing point to get higher. So this enemy is used as a projectile to hit other enemies, to hit switches, as a platforming aid. And then to add to that, you can chain this stuff together, and there are sections where you will have to jump with an enemy to get up to another enemy who's floating midair, who you can then grab midair, who you can then use to jump again and get even higher. And so there are moments of like secrets where you will have to do this 2 or 3 times in a row and nail it just to get up to this platform and find the thing. And Bally, you know how much I love mechanics that are like multi-purpose. This is really that. Like, it's really cool that this one idea of like grabbing enemies, you use it in all these different ways, and there are some great puzzles built around that idea of using them to like hit these switches on a timing basis of like, okay, I need to do this one, jump down there, get up there quickly enough to hit the other one while shooting this one in the background. And some of the windows feel really tight to the point where I was like, oh, can I even do this? But it's well designed enough and smart enough that, yeah, it still feels doable, and not unfair. Even though it was a PS1 game and you might expect some of that archaic design, still holds up really well. And from a difficulty standpoint as well, I think it's not overly hard. Like, it feels like it's well tuned and balanced, and that's always a worry when you go back to older games of like, well, they just kicked me in the balls, because this was an era where difficulty was thought of differently. And the checkpointing is generally quite good, and even if it wasn't, I have save states at my disposal, so even if I am before a endless death pit where I'm going to fall down and die, I can just make a save state before that, which is really helpful and nice. But yeah, I think that aesthetically the game's really interesting. It's a bizarre world. It's almost like kind of dreamlike reality, and the characters are super strange. You have this character called Cupo, who's this circle kind of ball guy who's your companion, your Navi almost throughout the game, and you're chatting back and forth. Klonoa does talk, but Klonoa talks with like a kind of babbling Animal Crossing dialect that is incomprehensible, and everything is kind of written out obviously in English as dialogue. But there's quite a bit of story that happens like between these different areas and setting stuff up in this world of these kind of creatures and these people. It's all a little out there and bizarre, and doesn't really cohere in a way. Like there's a sense of the places and the characters within them and all of it feeling just a little bit off and disjointed. And I think that they can do a good job with the Wii, not with the Wii, because they did remake this game for Wii, I should say. After I finished this, I was looking stuff up about it, reviews and stuff, and I realized that there was a Wii remake of the first game, which I could have played instead of this one. But I think it's actually kind of cool that I played the original PS1 version, because it gives me that like context for what the actual game was at the time, and it still holds up really well as that game. So the Wii version kind of like makes it obviously look a lot nicer, and maybe gets the style a bit more in line. But I think what this new Switch version is going to do is going to make it a bit more in line visually with the PS1 game, and that kind of brightness and the kind of cuteness of the character, because the Wii version of Klonoa felt a bit more teenage and like a bit more gritty. It was like that era where character design was leaning a bit more in that direction, right? They gave fucking Mario jean shorts with like texture on it in Brawl. That was the era that we were living through. Whereas now I think they feel a lot more safe to be like, well, Klonoa was more like a kid character, like a younger, shorter, plumper in some senses, and so I think that will lend itself to the style a bit better, and I wonder how they thread the needle on making it all cohere a bit more, because there is a weird kind of disconnect to the visual identity of the game that I could never really get my head around, and it is very satisfying in terms of its boss design, and it reminds me actually of Sonic Rush, speaking of Sonic, where you'd have those circle arenas, those kind of 3D cyclical arenas, where you kind of go around in a loop, and right, you are attacking enemies from behind and stuff like that. It's really, really good fun and holds up incredibly well. The levels are quite long. There's usually 2 parts to each level, and they're usually because they're quite puzzle based, and you're using these kind of mechanics of throwing enemies and jumping with enemies a bunch. It's a bit slower paced than you would expect for a platformer, and a bit more methodical, and there's a little bit of going back and forth and like revisiting parts of the level, not Metroidvania in style, but just like bigger levels with bigger spaces that you go between. And overall, a really unique, really cool platforming game that I think a lot of people are going to rediscover now when it comes to Switch, and reappraise Klonoa and say, actually, we should have paid more attention to this thing, because I think it did some really smart stuff. Like, in many ways, I think a lot of what we see from like indie platformers these days, like ideas like this, Klonoa was kind of already doing it in a way, and like taking a core mechanic and building an entire game around it that's unique and different, and I really, really like it. So big win for me for my first PS1 game that I'm going back to and revisiting. Klonoa. Door to Phantomile is going to be coming soon this year as well. So I'm definitely tempted to pick that up. Not that I want to replay through the game again, because I just played it. But the PS2 game comes with that collection. And the PS2 game is notoriously hard to play anywhere else. It was never remade. There's no easy way to play it right now. So I think that's probably the best way that people are going to get to play the second game as well. So check it out. Klonoa is cool. happy to like dive into another part of platforming history, because I think that's one of those things that I really, it's a genre that I'm a big fan of, and I want to know more about it. There's also a couple of GBA Klonoa games, which I've already loaded up, that I will be probably checking out at some point soon.
Who is the developer, did you say?
I believe it's Namco. So Namco made Klonoa, and yeah, it's everyone had a platforming mascot, man. You know, it was the 90s. You had to have one, so it makes sense. And there were a lot of bad ones, right? We can talk about Gex. We can talk about Glover. We can talk about all the terrible N64 ones. Klonoa is one of those that worked out, you know? So that was good. Cool. Well, that's it, Bally. That's the show. And there was a lot to talk about, a lot of video games, and a lot of fun stuff. But we need to get on out of here and get doing some other stuff. So how about we close this thing out by telling the fine folks where we can be found all over the place and stuff like that. I guess let's kick off with our email address, because we didn't have emails this show, as you could tell, very packed full with stuff, but we'll hopefully be back to that next time. Where can people send their burning questions to, Bally?
Please send your emails to thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. You can also join our Discord server, link to that in the description. There's a good old community going on over there, and there's a channel where you can leave a comment, a question in our email channel, so head on over there.
Absolutely. You can also support the show, if you would like to, on Patreon, patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife. You can go there, and for $1 you can get our bonus show, Nintendo Life, where we talk about not Nintendo video games. And Bally, we'd like to thank some of our patrons.
Yes, thank you to our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S., Atari Alex, Thomas, Matthew, and my wife Caroline. Thank you all for your $10 tier support, and thank you to all of our other patrons. Your support is hugely appreciated, and we should say we're approaching Horizon Forbidden West, and I'm hopefully planning on picking that up day one, so that's probably what we're going to end up be talking about.
I imagine so, yes. I imagine that'll be a big portion of that episode. Obviously you can find us in various places, such as twitter.com, where you will find me tweeting about Xenoblade 3 and literally nothing else. I think that's going to be my Twitter account for the next 7 months or so. I'm very excited about that game, if you didn't realize. Holy shit. But you can find me at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN 91.
And all Bally is doing is trying to tweet at me with higher scores in OlliOlli World, so that he baits me back into the game again, which is good fun. You can obviously find the podcast Twitter account at TNL Podcast. That's where you can get updates on all things we're doing, all the episodes going out, all that fun stuff. Link to our YouTube channel, Discord, and the like. And yeah, you can find our YouTube channel and Discord and all those things if you want to listen to us in other places. That's all good. But you can find us on various podcasting services such as Spotify, such as Stitcher, such as Google Podcasts. Actually, we're there as well, so you can listen to us all over the shop. Rate us, review us, find us in any podcasting app. That would be fantastic. And subscribe, and then you'll listen to us every 2 weeks. It'll be great, and you won't have to think about it anymore. It's lovely. It's good stuff. Cool. I think that's pretty much everything that we have to talk about today. Don't think I missed anything. I think I'm all good. I'm looking forward to wrapping up Arceus, rolling credits on that, and yeah, we'll have some more stuff to say about more video games coming soon. It is obviously that Nintendo Direct has given us a big schedule for the rest of the year. It's like March is going to be Triangle Strategy and Kirby, and then in April we got Advance Wars and Wii Sports, or Nintendo Switch Sports, and then I think it just continues from there. It's just unabated. It
was already looking fairly busy, and then that Direct just like bam, bam, bam releases this year. And we were saying this off mic, but like it's very rare in the video game space, other than perhaps a handful of indie games, where big companies announce games that actually come out within months. And the fact that Nintendo have done that with this Direct is very refreshing to see.
Yeah, sometimes we'll be like, well, they haven't announced anything yet, but it's because they can, they're able to.
They have the power.
They have the power to do so, and that's what they prefer to do. And, it's smart because it gets people excited for stuff that's just about to come around the corner. We didn't even know it existed. Who knew I was going to be jumping back into some 2006 nostalgia with sports this year? No idea, but it happened, and I'm looking forward to it. So thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time to talk about some more video game stuff and some fun things. But until then, see you soon. Bye-bye, folks. musical interlude used on today's show was the trailer theme from Xenoblade Chronicles 3, copyright Nintendo 2022. 3, 2, okay, episode 215. Nothing else we need to say at the start, no?
Claps might help.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
I was just waiting.
Fuck. God damn it. All right, let's clap. 3, 2, 1.